Back in the early part of the 1800s, there lived a man who grew to be one of the most influential people of his generation. Then, almost 120 years after his death, his legend rose again to grin down another batch of America's culture. Today, we cover the 1955 classic, Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Buena Vista Boys. Today's show is about the king of the wild frontier himself, Mr. Davy Crockett. And with me, of course, as always, is my co-host, Matt. Matt, I see on the video screen that you have a nice flannel. You look like a wood jack.
Yes, and I'm glad you noticed because it's the closest I had to a coonskin cap to put on.
Yeah, all my buckskins are in the wash, so I couldn't dress up.
Yeah, I wanted to be a fine wilderness man for the show.
Well, you're doing great at it. I appreciate that for you. Yeah, this movie, Davy Crockett. So I don't know. This is the hard part about being our age and then doing the things that we're doing on this show, like podcast, right? Or being on Twitch, because we record this live on Twitch. So if you guys want to ever like see what we do or what we look like, you can go to twitch.tv/earsup, ears with a Z, and you get the notification. Check it out. But I don't know if people know who Davy Crockett is or even are familiar with the name or the lore, the mythology behind Davy Crockett.
I think at most somebody might have the idea of man in coonskin cap, but I don't know if anyone in the modern age really has a history of like, why is this person important? Like, what did they do for America? Were they even a real person?
Right.
Or were they like a Paul Bunyan?
And I think maybe if you go through Disneyland and Frontierland, you might get a whiff here and there of a Davy Crockett reference to, in something. But yeah, for the most part, I think he's just sort of like a name that you hear from a book maybe or whatever.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like even in Disneyland, I could see somebody thinking he was a creation of Disneyland.
Yeah. Right. Walt's like, you know what I need to do? Sell more skins.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the movie Davy Crockett. It came out in, I believe it was 1955.
Yes,
I think is what it was. Yeah.
Their sixth, I think, live action film.
God, that's crazy. And we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to go through the whole movie like we always do. We have facts at the end, but I wanted to start this movie with a couple of notes here. Number one, to our point of what we're saying, this is why I wanted to clarify, because I don't know how many people know this, but Davy Crockett was an actual person. He was a real man, and this movie is based on stories and tall tales that he became known for telling, and then other people would write. I read that after his death, a lot of these stories came out that were just wildly made up, but attached his name to them, and then they became super popular, and that's the folklore that we hear about Davy Crockett today. All the weird stuff that he did in the frontier and, whatever, which I thought was really interesting. So he was a man and he did live a really large life, and we'll go through some of that later. But it was after his death that a lot of people were telling these tall tales about him and turning him into, I read in this really cool blog I'll post later on in the show notes maybe or something, or I'll read the URL. But this guy took an in-depth look in Davy Crockett's life, and he was basically America's first folk hero.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah. So I was thinking when I first watched this movie, I was like, God, this is cheesy, dude. But the more research I did on Davy Crockett, the man, and what he actually did, I thought about this movie in hindsight as more of a live action comic book movie, like a Marvel movie. And it made more sense to me. It became way less cheesy and more folksy.
It really does have sort of the highlights of these are the best stories we can tell about him to make him in the nicest light we can, because there are a few things about his past that are a little dark.
Sure, absolutely. And like I said, we'll get into more about who he was and what he did in the next segment. But where this movie starts out is with Andrew Jackson, who was appointed Major General, which, by the way, was a president. I think he was like the 5th president or something like that.
I'm going to have to look that up while we're sitting here.
Because it's 1802, 1813-ish.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's about
I feel like that tracks.
Yeah. So anyway, he was one of the single digit presidents, and he was appointed Major General of the Tennessee Militia in 1802. And there was a massacre at Fort Mims called the Fort Mims Massacre. As you know, back then naming conventions were pretty basic. When a group of Red Stick Indians attacked the small militia outpost occurring near Mobile, Mississippi Territory. And that was on August 30th, 1813. And that attack by the Redskin Indians became a rallying cry for the Creek War, which is the larger, larger war between like the Tennessee frontiersmen and the Native Americans that were in the area. And that's where we kind of enter Davy Crockett's timeline with this movie. On September 20th, 1813, Davy Crockett left his family and enlisted as a scout for a term of 90 days with the 2nd Regiment of Volunteer Mounted Riflemen. And that's, like I said, where the film starts. I'm assuming they don't say anything. The movie starts. So it's a little confusing, but that's what's happening. And apparently what Davy's role often in these sort of like stations or whatever is he would go hunt wild game for everybody because the militias were so scattered. There was no central government controlling them like the army, and they were off doing other war things, right? So they had to fend for themselves, often for months at a time. So Davy would use his extensive wildlife or wilderness acumen and go and hunt game for everybody. And he felt that he was better suited to that role than killing Creek warriors.
Yeah, he was the first DoorDash, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Uber Eats. No tips, Davy.
Insta Crockett.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that out of the way. Oh, I guess the other thing we should point out, Matt, is that, in the movie... So it's 1950s sentiment of Native Americans and, Indians and stuff like that. So you might hear an Injun or two. Hopefully that's not offensive to anybody. We're going to do our best to say Native American, but it's hard when you're writing and you're reading all the stuff and he's writing the word Injun and Indian. And so might slip out every now and then. But for the most
it's just one of those things. Yeah, you can't avoid it. Up top, it's like, history is what it is, and you are as sensitive as you can be to it nowadays, knowing what we know.
Yeah.
But it's like, hopefully people understand that this was a piece of art made then, and we are just critiquing that art. We don't agree with or support certain things that we know are outdated and wrong.
Yeah, and what I think is fascinating about Davy is that he did at some point. I wouldn't say he fought for Native American rights so much as for fairness, which is a big thread through his whole career. So there is some good. I think that there is some good part of the story that we can talk about, and so there is some positivity to it. It's not just like, here's a settler who came in and raised entire tribes and then was lauded as a hero. Like there is some back and forth on that, which is about all you can ask for the time, honestly.
And I was about to say that, like for the time that he was living in, the real Davy Crockett had some pretty progressive-esque values. You're right, of fairness or of sharing land and of people's own human decency.
Yeah.
More than a lot of other people
even today
at that era.
Yeah, right.
Agreed.
And again, I don't really want to get, uber political on these shows, but this is the third show where like modern day politics hasn't learned anything from 200 years ago. It's very, very sad. But anyway, let's get started with Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. First thing right off the bat, opening music for this is very, very intense. Lots of cymbal crashes, then it kind of mellows out to a slower pace, kind of the classic don't, just kind of like plains music, or if you're in Frontierland at Disneyland, sort of the background music, in there. During the credits, we get this wall of text, and it reads this. We extend our thanks and gratitude to the members of the Cherokee Indian Nation of North Carolina, to the forest rangers of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and to the people of Tennessee and Texas for the generous cooperation in the filming of this story. Which I thought was nice.
Yeah.
I feel like you didn't have to do it, but that was also back when they put all that stuff up the front of the movie anyway, right?
Yeah. So it's it was going to go in the back of the front either way. So it's going to be there.
We push in on a leather-bound journal titled Davy Crockett's Journal, and then underneath that says, written by himself. The cover opens to a page called The Creek Indian War, then fades into a map of the southern states, zooming in to finally settle on Fort Mim in Mississippi Territory. We have a cartoon representation of this fort, and suddenly a flaming arrow enters the screen, strikes the drawing, burning the map down, which is kind of cute because the fort in the map burns, so there's like embers.
Yeah.
The map itself doesn't burn, but the representation of the fort within it does, and I thought it was very effective.
I know, and I want to think that was Ken Anderson fire because he worked on this movie.
Oh, nice.
And so I really want to think that was a little bit of his animation.
Hell yeah, dude. So that fades into soldiers on horseback, which were real people now, so this is the real world. Through this opening, we have the Davy Crockett theme song playing. And I suppose the lyrics are kind of meant to match up with the story here. It kind of goes in chapters like this because here are the lyrics. They are as follows. I'm not going to sing it for you. In 1813, the Creeks rose up, adding redskin arrows to the country's woes. Now old Andy Jackson, as everybody knows, is the general they sent to fight the foes. So the Creek Indians rose up, not like the actual creeks of water flooded. Okay, all right.
Correct.
Already we're like 2 minutes in, and I heard this song, and I'm like, oh my god, you guys. We're the foes. There are foes. We're not the bad guys. They're the bad. Okay, here we go. Anyway, the soldiers are sitting on a riverbank, and we find General Andrew Jackson sitting in a tent, arm in a sling. Jackson is learning that the new scout they have, a man by the name of Crockett, is out hunting, as the camp is short on rations. When Jackson learns Crockett went across the river into enemy territory, he shouts that rations aren't what they're short on, it's brains. He sounds like a lovely man, it's very funny to me. Jackson demands that Davy be brought before him immediately. So we fade into the next scene. We find a man in deerskin clothes sitting by a tree at the bank of the river with a canoe of 3 soldiers approaching, shouting for Crockett. This guy, who we later learn offhandedly is named Georgie Russell. Like, that's one thing about this movie is they introduce 0 people.
Agreed. Yeah. I had to go into IMDb and I had to like constantly be rewinding when somebody said something. Yeah. They have no interest in the audience knowing who these guys are. All
Absolutely
disposable.
Not. Yeah. He gets up and he tries to shush the men, but they can't take a hint, right? So he's going, quiet. And they're going, but Crockett, hey, Crockett. Georgie points into the bushes and the soldier is told that Davy is trying to, quote, grin down a bear, which I had to look up. And apparently after his death, that the stories that were, the tall tales that were created around his legacy, that's where people would make up stories that Crockett would have to subdue a bear by staring it down and like showing his teeth to the bear. So it would scare the bear and then the bear would like die, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, he's just die out of pure fear of Davy Crockett's power.
Yeah. Well, the soldiers see Davy get thrown out of a bush with sounds of bear growls coming from it, and the bush is moving around, and it's very funny. Davy gets mad and announces he now has to do it, which is kill the bear, the old-fashioned way. And he pulls his buck knife out of his waist, jumps back into the bush, only to be thrown out by the bear that we never see. Suddenly, Davy appears from the brush, wiping literally nothing off of his knife blade. Like he's wiping on his leg and like nothing is coming off. And the growling is stopped. So he killed the bear. The soldiers tell Davy that General Jackson wants to see him. So we cut next into Davy walking back into camp carrying the bar. And all these people say bar is B''AR. That's not bear, it's a bar.
Yeah.
So they're carrying this little bar cub. It was a bear cub too. It was pretty small. I was kind of surprised.
This was a really small black bear, so I am not surprised he killed it with a knife. I feel like I could have kind of taken it.
I guess, yeah. And he's walking into camp shouting, "Full bellies tonight, boys." And all the men are cheering, of course, because they're starving.
Yeah.
He tells General Jackson about grinning, and then this speech made me hate Davy so much. But here's the whole interaction.
Now, how'd you kill that brute?
With my knife. I was figuring on grinning him to death, but this here stumble-footed mate of yours come along and busted up my concentrate.
Grinned him to death? What in thunderation is that?
Oh, it's something I've been experimenting with. You see, there's nothing so absolutely unresistible as an old-fashioned, good-natured grin. Like this. I started out on coons. I got so good at it one day, an old coon throwed up his hands the minute he seen my teeth. "You got me, Davy," he hollered, and he skinned down that tree and plopped himself in my sack before I knowed what was up. I figured the same thing ought to work on bars, but I never got a chance to find out. The major here come along and busted up my concentrating. I wound up having to wrestle this particular critter into table meat. What would you hankering to see me about, General?
We're on the edge of enemy territory. I want a scouting party to find out what them Redskins is up to. Major Norton and a squad of regulars will accompany us.
That wouldn't make the chore no easier, General.
Just be sure the Major brings back the information I want.
I don't know. A lot of that country bumpkin talk, it just grates on my nerves.
Dude, when he said wrestle this one into table meat, I'm going to use that at some point.
When you're in Costco.
Yeah. I'm just picking up this like 53,
hey kids, help me,
or something.
Help old man wrestle this side of pork into table meat.
Table meat.
So Jackson tells Davy to lead up a scouting party to see what the local Native Americans were up to, and we pick them up crossing the river on horseback. And we get to see Davy kind of being insufferable, telling the major that he should have the guys check their powder because they rode across in the higher water. So the powder may have gotten wet and they have to like reload their weapons possibly.
Yep.
Now, from what I can gather in my research into who Davy was, the troops he's with are the militia, which are local to the state of Tennessee. So they're not just some soldiers from like New England that came down to Tennessee and they have no idea. They would probably never have made this mistake of getting their powder wet. And I don't know, the whole thing just felt really annoying.
Yeah.
And at first it was like, it kind of seems like the play between the major and Davy. Davy tries to talk down to the major and like make himself come across as more of an expert, I guess. Because like, he doesn't respect the major, but then the major tells the guys to like reload. And I don't know. It was
well, I think
weird.
There's a certain level of Tennessee disdain, which is very quiet. You know how like there's sort of phrases Southern people will use to say "go fuck yourself,"
Bless
but it's
your
like
heart.
really nice. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
I feel like he's got a lot of that. I think he thinks that this major, like he says, stumble-footed. I thought that was hilarious. Like he feels like he just doesn't know the terrain. He's just stomping around in a place this guy's been his whole life.
Yeah. So Davy sees something on the dirt a little bit of ways. He jumps off his horse because he's leading this, pack of soldiers down, right? And he identifies a track in the dirt and he tells the major, he goes, stick with me. Well, this doesn't sit well with the major.
Better stick closer to us, Major.
You've done nothing but lead us through swamps, cane brakes, and briar patches all day. I see a trail over there, and there's no sense in not taking it.
Has the General got your wife's address? You take that trail and he's apt to have to write her a mighty sad letter.
We're here to locate Indians, Crockett, and I don't like the way you're doing it. Now, we'll cover more ground if we separate. I'm taking that trail. We'll be back here in this clearing by dawn. See that you are.
Better fix up a signal to identify ourselves. Can you do an old hoot owl?
Certainly. Woo! Woo!
That ought to fool the Redskins just dandy.
I love the forced laughter. The guy in the back, ha 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 ha.
Just dandy.
Yeah. Anyway, the major peels off his soldiers from Davy and goes to the trail, while Davy, being smart, is hunting Native Americans, and he doesn't want to go on the trail because he knows that they are being hunted. So Davy and Georgie go on, and do their own thing. Suddenly, they spot a war party up ahead, which is literally just like 6 Indians in a line walking around. And then there's another war party coming up behind them. They jump into the brush for cover and watch as the war party looks around a bit. That's all they do. They come in, they look around, and then they exit.
There wasn't a fire in that scene? Is that a little bit later?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah, basically next. Davy identifies the leader as Red Stick from the Creek Nation. As the war party moves on, Davy and Georgie follow. From a high vantage point, they find the war party dancing in a circle around a bonfire, whooping and hollering.
Oh, yeah, there.
So what were they doing in the brush anyway? Like looking for firewood?
Probably. Yeah, for that.
They didn't bring any
for
back.
that regular s'more creating fire they had down there.
Well, at like 2 PM also. Like, there was nothing. There was just nothing needed. They didn't need it. but that's
there's something about not having like a boombox that makes it hard to know when people in the 1800s were getting whipped up and hooping and hollering and whatnot. Like,
yeah, I guess setting things on fire will do it. Maybe that's why.
just like guys walking around a mid-afternoon fire is not like whipping up to me.
Yeah, well, you know. So Davy says they should go back and tell the general because it looks like, you know, a war. They're getting ready to go to war.
Sure.
Davy's, you know, and you learn looking into Davy's past, like he did spend some time with Cherokee Native Americans and the Cherokee tribe and stuff like that, or Comanche, excuse me. So he, you know, it stands to reason he would be a little bit familiar with their mannerisms and what things mean and their symbolism. But the movie will never tell you that. Davy says they should go back and tell the general. Frantically, they scamper back to the clearing, only to be pulled in another direction by the sound of gunfire. The major and his soldiers are fighting on the rocks in the middle of the river, like out in the open. They're standing on these like flat rocks in the middle of this river, shooting at the Native Americans who are ducking behind bigger rocks off the shore. These men are just standing there, upright, straight, tall as a tree, and missing when they shoot, which is even funnier. Davy and his friend come to their rescue. Like, didn't we learn anything from the Revolutionary War? When the Native Americans taught us how to, like, you know, hide behind stuff. No, they're just standing on a rock.
Yeah, see, that's what I was going to say. They have Revolutionary War brain. Like, it's just still innate in them. Stand straight as a tree.
Yeah, they can't hit you if you're not moving. Davy and his friend come to their rescue by giving them the old, quote, Crockett charge, which is literally, I was like, what's this going to be? This is some joke, right? It's literally just him and Georgie shouting, cavalry charge, on either side of the Indians. Like, they kind of break up. And, you know, they go, Company B, and there's the kind of fooling them to make it sound like there's a bunch of people, right? So the soldiers who are fighting hear this, and they're fooled also. They're celebrating. They start celebrating, going, yeah, because they think they're hearing General Jackson's arrival to bring them back up. Because somehow General Jackson knew that they needed backup.
Yeah, and they clearly don't know the sound of one horse, apparently.
Crockett and Georgie kill a few Native Americans who somehow forgot how to be accurate when shooting their arrows at Davy. And because they were picking off soldiers left and right. And then Davy and Georgie show up and they're like, whoa, I can't hit this man. He has a force field. And eventually the skirmish is over. The general looks upset. It was only the two men, Davy and Georgie, coming to rescue them. And again, I don't know, Davy kind of seems insufferable about the whole thing, but you know, it was a little deserved at that point. Well, it's like, it's only you two? What do you want, man? You were gonna die. Leave me alone.
Yeah, Georgie says didn't he say it was enough, ain't it?
Something like that.
And I really like that. Like, I have to actually say that this is probably one of my more favorite parts of this movie. I thought this was really funny. Yeah. Like, I thought this was very clever because you have these two actors really playing it to the hilt, right? Really just, like, especially when he yells Company B, like, Buddy Upson's like, Company B rolling in. I'm like, oh, this is really funny.
They all ride back to camp to tell Jackson about the upcoming attack by the Creek Nation. Jackson strikes camp and they move out towards the Creek camp in order to get the drop on the Creek Indians. After silently dispatching 2 Creek lookouts, the soldiers line up ready to advance on the camp and capture Red Stick. And what happens is so they're all militia, but the Tennessee Volunteers, which are Davy and the people in buckskin, right? So the Tennessee Volunteers, they separate from the militia proper, and the militia sits back basically and has the volunteers sort of flush the Native Americans to the militia.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. They split up. With the shout of, give it to 'em, boys, the band of volunteers rush the camp, fighting hand-to-hand with the Indians, even though they were all armed with muskets and could have mowed them all down from the brush. Davy locks up with Red Stick and promptly gets conked on the head and is left on the ground as the Indians charge at the soldiers, who were all lined up ready to shoot. As this to me was very funny. As the general gives the command to fire, all of the charging Native Americans drop down to the ground, and the musket balls miss the entire group.
Yeah.
Standing back up, they continue their charge, running right through the soldiers and escaping. Because, you know, again,
that reload.
Yeah, this was a single shot musket, right? So you shoot, then you had to take the powder out the powder horn, pour it in, get the tamp it down, put the ball in, and then, lock it and then shoot, right? So you basically had a one shot and that's it. So you go shoot, everyone hits the floor, then there's no reloading, and then the Indians just scoot by. They break right through the line. Which
is extremely smart.
Yeah, it would be a good tactic if the battle took place in a hallway. But like you could literally just run around them. You don't have to run through. They ran over these men. It was funny. I'm like, all right, man. So here we are. We're back at camp, recovering and we're treating the wounded. Crockett says to Jackson that he and the rest of the volunteers are heading home because their contracts are up and they want to go check on their families. Totally reasonable. He's told no. But says, well, his wife would worry, so how about yes? And he leaves, which is pretty cool. It was like, So it's in this next scene that we finally learn this other guy's name, Georgie, right? But it's only up to this point. We have no idea what his name was. Davy never calls him Georgie up until this point. And it wasn't even him. It was his wife, because we're seeing Davy's wife for the first time in this scene. It's just, I don't know, it's crazy. So
Polly.
So Davy and Georgie arrive at Davy's house, and his two kids rush out to meet them, followed by Davy's wife. The men dismount, and Georgie has one of the more uncomfortable scenes in this movie.
Pa's back!
Oh, Davy, you're back!
Hello, Pa. Hi, Pa.
Well, reckon now's as good a time as any to collect what I got coming.
Joe G. Russell, what happened to you while you've been gone?
Well, Davy allowed us how I had a kiss coming for saving his life.
He sure did.
Well, in that case...
You ain't never gonna get a woman that way. Reckon I gotta learn you how.
So what happened in this scene is earlier on, Georgie saves Davy's life when Davy gets clonked on the head by Red Stick, right? And he's like, oh, I reckon Polly will let you have a kiss or whatever. So they arrive at Davy's house. They arrive at Davy's house, and Georgie goes, well, now's as good a time as any to take my kiss. And without Polly knowing this, he spins her around and just plants one on her. And then she goes, what happened? And he's like, well, I was owed one. He's like, oh, she's like, oh, well, in that case, and then kisses him back. And then Davy comes over and goes, oh, let me teach you how to really do it. And then spins Polly around and kisses her. And I'm like, what? These people are stuck in the backwoods too long. They've been away from civilization for too long.
This is that backwoods thruppling.
It was very polio. It was very, very, very wild. I guess the Old West really was just as weird as I thought it was, So after that, we fade into Davy and his wife by the fire, holding each other very post-coitally, I think it looks like. I don't know. She's in like what you call like an Old West nightgown, which is basically just a long white linen dress. But it's like
I love that it's got these floofy shoulder pieces.
Yeah.
That's a nice touch.
Yeah, and he's just in pants and like a wool shirt, like whatever. She looks swept away in the moment, and Davy looks like he'd rather be doing research in a law library. Like he's just stone-faced. He could not care less. He really couldn't.
He's got a lot of thinking to do.
Apparently. She tells him how much she loves the fact that he's home for good, and Davy hits her with the old, well, not presactly, which is what he says. And, he'll be gone at least during the winter, but he'll be back maybe sooner. He doesn't really know, but he's going back out, is what she's saying. So our little cartoon map is back to take us back to the war, and so is another section of the theme song, where we learn that Red Stick has been running down into Florida, burning his way across the swampland. Now it's here that Davy meets back up with the soldiers after he takes care of business at home and the winter is, the snow thaws and he can leave, right? And we learn that General Jackson has been sent to New Orleans, and now Major Norton is in charge of the militia. So Davy and Georgie meet with him in his tent, where he tells the men he's at his wit's end. Most of the men have swamp fever, which sounds delightful. Himself included, right? And he can't afford to send many more patrols out because they end up not coming back. I mean, that's a good enough reason to not.
Yeah. Diminishing returns.
Yeah, right. Davy reckons it's his turn to go out scouting, and we cut to Davy and Georgie stomping through the swamp, trying to find some sign of Red Stick and his Native American band. Davy locates some moccasin tracks, and the two men split off in either direction. So, also, I wouldn't know they're moccasin tracks, right? Because I'm dumb. But Davy sure does, and he doesn't call them footprints. He calls them moccasin tracks, just so you know they're fighting Native Americans.
Yeah.
So the two men split off in either direction to try to pick up a fresh trail. It's like around this little lake or whatever, right? So as Georgie's working the ground on one side and Davy's working the ground on the other, a Creek brave sneaks up behind Georgie and throws a tomahawk right at his back. And it hits him square in the middle of his back, Matt. But intentional or not, the weapon doesn't stick and it bounces off his back, which was kind of surprising to me. It's a full-on hatchet in the back, but it bounced off.
Well, and I couldn't tell if it was supposed to have killed Georgie.
See,
you know,
that's what I mean. Like intentional or not, like was it meant to just like knock him off balance? Because I would imagine, so it's like axe throwing, which I've never done, but I've seen plenty of like fail videos at it.
Sure.
Where, you know, that'll just bounce right back at you if you don't hit the blade right in. So I imagine you could throw it and have it hit the flat end at your target, because you can also throw it, it's a skill to throw it and get the blade to stick, right? So I imagine it's same thing.
Well, it's like up until that point in this movie, when there was violence, there was never any blood, even with arrows. I think there was a little bit on Davy when he ended up getting hit over the head by Red Stick the first encounter.
Yeah, maybe.
But other than that, there's no blood or wounds on anybody when they're fighting.
Absolutely.
So I couldn't tell if this, was supposed to be just like a blunt back to the, you know, like hit in the back.
Yeah.
Or if like, oh, okay, Georgie's dead. He's done. That's sad.
That's it. Yeah.
You know,
what was equally surprising was the fact that this impact knocks Georgie flat out. Like the man just collapses and he's out. It's like he got hit in the head, but no, it's just the middle of his back. It's weird.
Yeah.
Red Stick enters the scene and stops the brave who threw the axe from killing Georgie outright. And instead, they take the poor unconscious man away. Now back to Davy, he can't find Georgie. They were going to meet up and he can't find him. And after a very brief close encounter with an alligator, who he smashes in the head with the butt of his rifle, Davy follows Georgie's track into the forest. We fade out on Davy and we come up at the Creek Indian camp. They have Georgie tied up to a large stake, and for some reason, his shirt is off. It's like, why is this man's shirt off? I don't understand.
Appreciate it.
He's being questioned by Red Stick as to where the others in his group are. Red Stick assumes that there's more militiamen out there. Well, Georgie knows that snitches get stitches, so he insists that he's alone out there. There's nobody else with him. He almost did it. I know I've done it before. See, now I'm all in my head about it. I hate it.
Uh-oh.
One of the Native Americans surrounding Georgie bends over the fire at his feet and picks up a small flaming stick. And he holds it up in a way that's suggestive of displaying this small flaming stick to Georgie rather than actually threatening to burn him with it, which was sort of the point of it. But he kind of holds it up and he's like, see? It's like it's almost like it's my nice stick. It's pretty cool. Look at the fire. It's like when you're at camp. It
burns.
Yeah, you're at Boy Scout camp and the Scoutmaster's not looking and you pull a stick out. Like, wow, do you see how far the fire came down this stick? Isn't that cool?
Wow.
Davy leaps up from the brush and cries out, "Creek warriors, hear me." And one of the braves in this little group of, 15 or 20 people raises his musket to fire at Davy, and Davy throws a buck knife deep into the man's midsection. He drops, and the entire group of Indians just stands there as this happens.
Yep.
There's no emotion on a single person's face. They kind of were like, it was almost like, well, friend, he said, hear me. Why did you try to shoot him? Why? Of course you died. Why would you do this?
Nobody goes, Larry, no.
Yeah, no, right? No one else threatens him. No one raises a weapon or whatever. But anyway, that's what happens. And then we get a cute little battle going on.
Creek warriors, hear me! Any more you cussed varmints think I ain't worth listening to?
Speak, white man.
Well, I ain't a soldier. I'm a settler. I'm a hunter like you.
Hunter? You hunt Indians?
Only because you made war on us. Your chiefs, the smart ones, have give up. They found out that war's no good.
White man talk. War no good because soldiers all die.
How many Creek warriors have died? How many of you women are crying for their men? How many of you young'uns ain't got no fathers?
You talk like woman.
Well, I'm talking sense, and you know it. You're brave, Red Stick, and your warriors is brave. But in the end, they're all going to die because you're a bad chief.
Because I take many white scalps. Because soon I burn white man's friend.
No, Red Stick. Because you could all go home in peace if you just listened to reason. But since you won't, I reckon I gotta challenge you according to Indian law.
Indian law no good for white man.
Why not? White man's law would be good for Indian if you'd give it half a chance. How about it, Red Stick?
Tomahawks.
I guess that's a no. But what I realized in this scene is a pole. And then, it looked like there were feathers hanging from it. It's like a ceremonial pole or whatever. But it's scalps.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until he goes, because we take many white man's scalp or whatever he says. And, looking at it closely, it's like the underside of skin and there's blood and there's like long white hair. I was like, oh my God, that's kind of brutal.
Yeah. For a movie that really doesn't do blood or gore of any kind, like they won't even show him stabbing a bear or anything like that.
Yeah.
Won't even have blood on his buck knife when he's done killing a bear. The scalps were interesting, to say the least. Like they almost give like an Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom kind of vibe. Like it's that sort of, he's kind of moving into that kind of level of gore.
Yeah, I could get that for sure. So Davy and Red Stick are now each handed weapons, a tomahawk and I guess some kind of like bludgeoning tool or ball-headed club. I tried to look it up, what like a Creek, a Creek warrior,
a whack and stick
battle, whack and stick would be for sure. And there's like some in like Mayan culture, but I couldn't find anything for Native American culture, but it's basically a stick with like a ball-headed club and a ball on the head of the club. That's basically what it is. So anyway, they each have one each, right? They face off, stepping around and around. Then they launch at each other, swinging away, blocking shots, moving from land into the river, and then back up again. Eventually, after much physical contact, Red Stick has the upper hand on Davy, a tomahawk at the ready, or as Red Stick says, Tommyhawk. Tommyhawk. Davy, who's long since lost his weapons, does the only thing he knows how to do, be awkward and shows his teeth to the other man. I know this is awesome. A callback from the beginning with the whole grinning down a bear, but the transition Davy takes from looking normal to showing about 12.5% more teeth is just like way too subtle for me. And I couldn't understand what he was doing the first time I watched it. I was like, what is that?
Because it comes on out of nowhere. And the moment you get it, you're like, okay, all right, I get what he's doing. All right.
But it's almost like to your point earlier, where you're like, it's that Southern, I really don't care attitude. Like I couldn't be more bothered. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
It's like, you're going to get cleaved in the face. You're going to get cleaved in two. And you're pulling out this grinning thing. Come on, whatever. Anyway.
Well, yeah. And it's like, and he doesn't do a great job at it. He's like, he doesn't really get his lips pulled back very far. So you almost can't tell he's doing the grin.
Almost.
Couldn't tell at all. Strange.
Yeah.
Very off-putting.
Anyway, the trick doesn't work. Redskin holds Davy against the tree, swings at his head, and somehow misses his entire head. Like Red Stick has him grabbed by the throat, and he's about to chop his head, and he missed, and he struck the tree instead.
Yeah.
So Davy flips the reversal, grabs the tomahawk out of the tree, and convinces Red Stick to listen to reason instead of clubbing him in the head. Davy commands everybody to drop their weapons and join the other chiefs in a treaty. Do this, and he promises the government will let them live in peace on their own land. Red Stick comes back with a white government lie, to which Davy says, Davy Crockett don't lie. Red Stick issues the command to let Georgie free, and the two men shake on the newly formed deal. We're back at the Crockett homestead, where Davy has kept his promise to his wife and returned before winter was over, with our jaunty little theme song filling in some exposition here, telling us that Davy was able to stay home just long enough for the snow to thaw and to get him restless for exploring once again. So Davy says goodbye to his family and takes off. His wife wants him to find some land to settle on, and this is the second movie that takes place in the 1800s where folks have very reasonable places to live with land, but still insist on pushing into the interior of the country for more of unknown things. And learning more about Davy's life, it's like he was poor his entire life. So I guess I could sort of get it, but they don't explain that here. And it's like, I just want more. It's like, but you have enough.
I just got that pioneer itch. I just need to be conquering and building all over. I don't know why.
So the two men, Davy and Georgie, head west to the banks of the mighty Mississippi River, where they reckon this is a fine place to stake a claim for some land. Riding into the nearest settlement, Davy bothers the very first person he sees with his inquiries. Thought it was interesting pulling clips like, there's a woman right here. And when Davy rides up, he sees the woman right here, but he calls out to the man who's farther away from the woman.
Yeah. Well, what's a woman gonna know, Jason?
Yeah, Davy's not trying to fold clothes.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
He doesn't need to have a biscuit recipe told to him. He's fine.
Hold on now, mister. Who do we see about filing a claim on some land?
Why, me. But you'll have to wait till after I judge a shooting match.
A shooting match? Any objection to a couple of strangers buying in?
Save your money. You'll be shooting against Bigfoot Mason.
Reckon we can risk $1?
Sound like they started without you.
You should have waited for me, Bigfoot. You wasn't here.
Riding the nuts, Bigfoot.
Well, that's the last round. The beef's mine. Wait a minute. This ain't fair judging. Them's friends of yours. Don't hear no complaints from the losers, do you?
Hey, what do you figure that beef you want's worth?
$15 cash money. Why?
Never went to a shooting match in my life without getting at least one shot off.
One shot it is. Hey, Bruno, charge up my other rifle and give her 2 extra thimbles.
First of all, what man in Tennessee is called Bruno?
Yeah.
Doesn't really seem like a very settler kind of name, but whatever.
I'm watching this movie and I'm like, how is there already like a little Italy in New York City that this guy is from, even though it's the 1800s? Like, this guy feels like he's like, yeah, had my own pizzeria, headed out this way, check out my luck.
You need anything, you will let old Bigfoot know.
Yeah. So how is this persona? How does it already exist out here?
So we're at the shooting match. We see this big, tall side of man called Bigfoot. And you heard what happened. Davy kind of cons his way into at least taking one shot at the prize, right?
And what is that prize? What is it?
It's a calf. It's a cow, basically. Yeah, it's a whole cow.
And you have no idea the whole time because they're just saying beef.
Yeah, they're saying side of beef. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you don't find out till later what they're talking about. This movie doesn't tell you anything. They just assume you know everything.
Why would it, man? So both men take aim and they shoot dead center into the target equally, right? The judge says they need to go again because it's a tie. And Bigfoot fires just under his previous shot, but Davy fires, and at first blush, it seems like he missed the whole board. Everybody else is celebrating because he lost. And the judge digs around in the target of Davy's and pulls out 2 musket balls. So Davy did a Robin Hood on the whole shooting match. He shot so clean, directly right into his other shot.
Yep.
So that was part of his lore that he's like such an accurate shot. Davy wins. Bigfoot is mad, and he and Georgie now have a cow. Not bad for being in town for less than 5 minutes. You piss off the biggest guy around, and you win a cow. Well, it's a calf, but still.
He gets handed this cow, and that's when I officially understood. Oh, they were shooting for a cow for food.
That's the side of beef. Yeah.
Yeah.
We find the boys indoors signing deeds for some land when the town official tells Davy that Bigfoot is really kind of a jerk off because he's running the local Indians off their land and selling it to settlers who don't know any better. The man tells the two that the magistrate went to try and serve a warrant to Bigfoot because he had some, issues or whatever, but the magistrate never came back.
Oof.
Suddenly, Bigfoot had a shiny new gun in his hands, which looked exactly like the one the magistrate used to have. Which, like, instead of letting him compete in the shooting match, just kill him.
Yeah.
What? Like, I don't understand the big deal. You're on the frontier. There's no law, basically. Here's this man that you're pretty sure killed some other dude. Shoot him. Kill this man.
Yeah, while he's getting ready to aim his gun for the shooting match, just blow him away.
Yeah, don't give him a cow. Come on,
it's
man.
not a problem.
So, Davy is then offered the job of magistrate in order to bring some law and order to these parts. And Davy says, well, it'll take some thinking because he has to build his family's cabin so they can come out and join him. And we're transitioning to the next scene. And in this scene, it kind of made me realize Georgie always looks like he's backing away from someone's bad breath. He kind of is like, back really straight, but his head kind of back. And so it kind of makes his chin disappear. And he kind of just looks like he's receding into his own back because something doesn't smell right in front of him.
Yeah, Buddy Ebsen, he's always sort of had this weird, like, disappearing chin.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on.
So Davy and Georgie are now on the plot of land that they bought, hacking away at some logs. Georgie goes off to grab some water, and as he does, he sees a man ducked down behind the bushes. Now, you don't get a real good look at the guy, but you already know he's a Native American because of the stereotypical Native American music stinger they use. Like a war drum chant, you know what I'm talking about. If I told you Native American drums, that sound is what they use just for like 2 or 3 seconds. So you know exactly, what's going on.
Sure.
Davy joins Georgie in the brush looking around and they find a family hiding, a woman and two children or 3 children or whatever it was. The man is called Charlie Two Shirts and he's the Cherokee neighbor the man in town told them about. And I say the man all the time because I don't know this guy's name. They never introduced him or what he does, who he is. I have no idea what his name is. So that's just...
why would they?
Yeah.
I mean, you've already been there. That's the whole point. This movie is told from the point of view of, you've already been there.
Right.
Like, you were there, don't you remember?
Charlie tells him a story of how he came to be hiding in the brush and why he has like a bunch of red paint on his face, which is just, blood. But it's 1950s blood, so it's red paint.
Who are you? Charlie Two Shirts.
Why, he's our neighbor.
Well, what happened to you?
3 white men come to my farm. Tell Charlie Two Shirts, get off. I say this is my land. They say Indian got no land. I show paper. This land belong Cherokee. They tear paper up. Then Charlie Two Shirt fight.
Reckon I'm going to take on that job of magistrate right now.
So we're fading up to the next scene. Davy, Georgie, and Charlie Two Shirts approach Charlie's cabin, where Bigfoot and his men are now living. Bigfoot promptly comes out on the porch and says he's taken this land as it's, quote, too good for Injuns. Like, oh my God.
Oof.
And asks, since when is Davy Crockett a friend to the Indians? And Davy says they're people just like anyone, and we have a peace treaty with them. Davy and Bigfoot exchange what passes as threatening talk for the times, and Davy asks, how do you have it, Bigfoot? To which Bigfoot replies, rough and tumble. And I was a little disappointed to learn that this only meant fighting. Round and round they go, dukes all the way up in this really classic fighting style you're probably picturing in your head. Davy has his fists up, but his palms facing him, and he looks like someone who thinks they know how to fight by reading about it in a magazine.
Yeah, they saw the Notre Dame Fighting Irish figure, and they're like, this is fighting.
That's a man right there. The men exchange a couple blows. Bigfoot gets knocked down. He grabs a handful of dirt and throws it in Davy's face, blinding him. What's he going to do? They roll around some more, and Davy eventually ends up beating Bigfoot bloody. The 3 men bring Bigfoot and his little buddy into town to stand trial, and the town is ecstatic. They can finally dance and party in public without a fight breaking out. Mr. Russell is the name of the man who sold Davy and Georgie the land. We finally figure his name out. He brings Davy inside to tell him that the area is going to get itself representation in Nashville, and they want to send Davy to represent them in the state legislature.
Quite a frolic you got going here.
Yeah, ain't it? Since Davy's been magistrate here, we finally can enjoy ourselves without it turning into a brawl.
Well, I'll do the trading and meet you out by the dance. Save a pretty girl for me.
Before that fiddle gets into your foot, I got some tidings for you. Come on over to my place. I'll tell you about it. You know, folks around here is pretty proud of the job you done for us, Davy. Since you got rid of Bigfoot Mason and his crowd, honest settlers is moving in again. Fact is, there's so many of them, we're going to get us representation in Nashville. And that's what I want to talk to you about. We held us a meeting last night to pick the fellow we want to run for state legislature. You won, hands down.
Well, I'm plumb fluttered by the honor, but I ain't no politician. You got the wrong bare tree, Judge. Better get somebody more fit.
Like Amos Thorpe? That lawyer tried to get Bigfoot off?
You wouldn't run him.
Well, we wouldn't, but the opposition is. And Thorpe's got plenty of money to spend on a campaign.
Yeah, money he made off them engine land grabs.
Now, we figure you're the only man that's got a chance of beating him. Will you run against him?
The way you put it, I ain't got much choice.
So Davy is in. Yay, he's going to be in the government.
And in that last scene, can we just talk about how Fess Parker like barely opened his mouth?
I don't understand how this man got so famous because he does an objectively terrible job at acting.
When he made bear up a tree like one word. Yeah, to bear up a tree.
Bear up a tree. It's like Elvis. If Elvis did that. But you know what? I mean, Elvis was from the South. Maybe that's just the dialect. I don't know.
Yeah, geez, man.
But as we exit out into the celebration, Georgie has a letter for Davy. Apparently it's from Davy's sister-in-law, writing to inform Davy that his wife Polly took ill with a fever and passed away. She adds not to worry about the boys because the boys need a mother and already they feel like her own, which I took as her staking her claim on these children. Like, these kids are mine now, and you just forget all about them.
Totally. Like, don't bother coming home. Like, after you build your land or whatever, don't send for them.
You'll never see them again.
Yeah.
But know that we'll tell them of you.
That's kind of how it felt to me, too.
So Davy, understandably sad, of course, walks off into the woods, alone. And I did actually like this interaction. I probably should have pulled the clip, but Georgie's like, can I do anything? And he's like, just leave me alone for a little bit. And I was like, wow. That's actually a pretty self-aware conversation for two men to have.
Yeah.
Like you can't really, I feel like you can't even say that these days, like you can't really be that vulnerable with your male friend. It's not like cool or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is like 1815 or 1820 or whatever it is. And he's like, I just need to be alone for a bit. And Georgie's like, I get it.
No, and that's what's funny too, is like, I could totally see him saying that to Georgie, like from knowing these two characters and having Georgie be like, sounds good. And then literally never talking to him again, like giving him like 7 years.
Yeah. You needed time.
Until literally Davy comes back and goes, how you been, Georgie? And then Georgie just goes, I've been fine.
Yeah.
And then they just start talking again.
Yeah. So we pick Davy up sometime later. Not sure how much time has passed because already, if you're a little confused with the timeline, so am I. Because this movie doesn't really make any sense. Like the time that it took for Davy to capture Bigfoot to then get offered the job to be representative in Nashville, time has passed, but I don't know how much because it's just a fading out scene. So I have no idea.
Yeah, it feels like he captured Bigfoot and they were all waiting to come outside and dance.
That's what I thought was happening.
All one day.
That's exactly what I thought the first time I watched it. I was like, oh, and then Georgie has a bunch of furs over her shoulder. I'm like, oh, more time. Okay, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah.
So Davy is now on the campaign trail to be elected to government in Nashville, and he's addressing a kind of a small group of folks from underneath a tall, shady tree, which actually looks very nice.
Well, here it goes. My honorable opponent knows I ain't much shucks at speech fine. It's mighty kind of him to let me get up and speak first so he can make a lie out of everything I say. Truth is, I don't know nothing at all about politics. I'll leave that up to him. But I do know the woods and the folks in them. And if you send me to Nashville, I'll represent you as honest as I can.
Hooray for Davy!
I reckon that's all I got to say. If this here speech seems a mite brief, looks like my worthy opponent's all set to make up for it. And if this speech's going to be as dry as I think it is, maybe we better go over to the tavern and wet our whistles with a little Mountain Dew.
Come on, boys. Follow me.
Voters of the sovereign state of Tennessee, I'm well aware of the sacred responsibility you're about
that I thought that scene was really kind of cool because it's very brief. I mean, it's 20 seconds or whatever, but it showcases, at this point, Davy is sort of becoming like a local legend because of how charismatic he is. And it definitely showcases that because so he's standing in front of a tree. Amos, the guy who he's running against, is, in a suit and he has 3 or 4 pieces of paper. So when Davy goes like, oh, it looks like he's about to make up for my brief speech, it's because he literally has like a long speech planned for it. And he's like, you know what? If this is going to be as boring as I think it is, let's get out of here and get drunk. And everyone's like, yeah okay. And then they leave and he takes the entire crowd. And Amos is up there trying to like call after them to like give a speech and whatever.
Yeah, no, it works really well because Davy goes up there, he's hunching his shoulders. He's like, well, I don't know nothing about no politicking, but it's like he knows exactly what he's doing. It's the same thing he did in the first part of the scene where he's like, this stumble-footed moron is getting in my way, and he's doing all these kindly Southern digs or what have you. Like that's the same speech. It's the same. He has this great talent for just backhanded backwater compliments.
And with that,
I love it.
Davy wins the election and he's sent on over to Nashville. We enter on a boarding house in Nashville with Major Norton from the first scene dropping in to visit. Now, Norton wants Davy's help in making Andrew Jackson the next president of the United States. Norton says he can get Davy an invite to Jackson's plantation. And Davy goes, yeah, that sounds great. I've never been up there. And you'll never guess where we dissolve into the next scene. Exterior day, plantation home of one General Andrew Jackson. The 2 men sit down and Jackson pours Crockett some moonshine that he's been hiding. He's like, it's only for mountain folk. Jackson takes a sip and Crockett empties the glass in 3 gulps. He's like an absolute mad lad. He just pops that thing.
Oh, yeah.
It made me realize how many laws have been written in these young times of our country under the haze of alcohol. I think it really would explain a lot, to be honest with you.
Like why everyone was so hopeful back then. Yeah, this is going to work for sure.
Not everybody has fair representation. It'll be fine. It's okay. Because don't you feel good right now thinking about this? Jackson presents him with another thing he has to hide. He says it's a little booklet called The Exploits of Davy Crockett in the Rocky Mountains, to which Davy replies, why, I ain't never been west of the muddy old Mississippi. We open the front cover to reveal the author, who is none other than Davy's pal, Georgie Russell. And this is where the timeline really showcases how little it cares about the viewer and their ability to follow along. Because how friggin' long has it been that Georgie can write a whole darn book about Davy and get it published and have it distributed far enough to have the whole state talking about him?
Yep.
Jackson points out that these little books, these little zines, are making him famous, and Jackson wants Davy to run for Congress now.
Yeah.
Davy replies that if he gets in, he won't be taking orders from Jackson, only the people that elected him. So Davy runs for Congress and he wins, of course. And we see him riding his horse into DC, wearing his buckskins because he's a man of the people, I guess, And there he is cruising through the halls of Congress in his coonskin cap and the whole deal when he runs into Georgie. The 2 men celebrate with a very manly set of shoulder claps. And Davy gives Georgie shit about all the books he's been pumping out, saying that now he can't go into Congress wearing a suit. He has to go in looking like the king of the wild frontier, thanks to him and his little zine factory. Georgie notes how ungrateful that sounds, and Davy tells him to get up into the gallery because he has to make a speech, and Georgie really needs to hear it.
Yeah, now I got to live up to him. Do you think I'm going to dress like any self-respecting congressman? No. I got to go in there like the king of the wild frontier, thanks to you.
Well, Davy, that's downright ungrateful. Here I come all the way from the old by the river just to wish you luck on your maiden speech.
Well, you just get yourself up there in the gallery. You're going to hear a real gutty one.
Before we get to the order of business for the day, the chair will recognize the new gentleman from Tennessee, the Honorable David Crockett.
Mr. Speaker, gentlemen, a fellow around called a Master at Arms tells me a new congressman's supposed to make a self-introducing speech. Well, here she goes.
I'm David Crockett, fresh from the backwoods. I'm half horse, half alligator, and a little touched with snapping turtle. I got the fastest horse, the prettiest sister, the surest rifle, and the ugliest dog in Tennessee. My father can lick any man in Kentucky, and I can lick my father. I'd hug a bear too close for comfort and eat any man alive opposed to Andy Jackson. Now, some congressmen take pride in saying a lot about nothing, like I'm doing right now. Others don't do nothing for their pay, but just listen, day in and day out. I wish I may be shot if I don't do more than listen. And the next time I get up before you, I'll have something to say worth saying.
There you go. Oh, I liked it. Once again, we're showcasing Davy's charm. You know, his calculated, focused charm. Because you're right, he does know what he's doing. But
he just said it on the way in. He's like, now I got to go in there and I got to act like some backwater asshole.
That's true, yeah. So we're back at the stately home of General Jackson in this. So we leave this scene into General Jackson's home. Maybe it's in D.C., maybe it's in Tennessee. I don't really know where it is anymore. Or is he the president now? Because I couldn't really tell based on the conversation that they're having. Like, is he the president? I don't know.
Yeah, we were there, so we should already know this.
Yeah. At any rate, Jackson tells Davy he plans on westward expansion because the country is almost at 13 million people. Imagine that.
Wow.
It's just like,
we're just bursting at the seams.
I know. We need more. We need to steal more land. I mean, right now we have 340 million in this country. Yeah. And it's like, you know, we're building our houses 25 or 50 stories high, like our apartment buildings, to house everybody. But these people have 13 million. Well, we need to go all the way across the West. What, are you kidding me? This is not enough room.
I'm renting out my bathroom and both my closets right now.
It's a short scene that's setting up some tension later. But for now, just remember, Andrew Jackson wants westward expansion. And that comes at a cost. We're heading back to Congress, where Major Norton tells Davy that the president wants him to go on a speaking tour of the big eastern cities. And we find out that Jackson is the president, and it's also his second term. So somehow, in the transition between scenes, we've missed 2 whole election cycles. I just don't get it. So Davy heads out via montage, and we pick him up giving a speech in Philadelphia. Suddenly, Georgie comes in with some distressing news. Major Norton wasn't helping him by sending him on the speaking tour. He wanted to get Davy out of the way so that the party could bring Jackson's Indian bill into debate. And they are talking about it on the floor right now. The bill was part of the Western expansion Jackson was talking about, which involved breaking the treaties with the Native Americans and taking their land. Davy and Georgie procure fresh horses and ride back to D.C., where in the halls of Congress, they run into Major Norton. Now, just before Davy and Georgie entered, Norton was pushing for the vote, but was told that the opposition wasn't giving up the floor, which I guess is the filibuster.
Yeah.
I'm smart. As Davy and Georgie try to get into the chamber, Norton lies and says, "Oh, they already voted. It's passed. It's too late, bro." And Davy says, "Well, they're just going to have to change their minds." And Norton hits him with the, "If you go in there, you're committing political suicide." To which Davy hits him, like literally clocks him. He just hits him. Yeah. He bursts into the floor, and one congressman announces that he'll yield to Davy.
Why, Davy, I didn't expect you back for a week.
I know.
Now, Davy, if you're worried about the Indian bill, it's all over. They've already passed it.
They'll have to change their minds.
I'm warning you, Crockett. Go in there and you're committing political suicide.
You know what I think about your kind of politics?
I yield to the gentleman from Tennessee.
Mr. Speaker, fellow members of the Congress of these United States, I've stood before you a good many times in fights and fun, and we've had a laugh or two for the good of the country and our own digestions. But you can fold up your grins and put them away, for you'll hear no jokes from Davy Crockett today. You have before you something called an Indian bill. I don't aim to keep you here much longer arguing about it. You've had enough of that already. But before it comes to a vote, I just want to remind you of something. Expansion is a mighty fine thing. Sure, we gotta grow, but not at the expense of the things this country was founded to protect. The government's promises set out in the Indian treaties is as sacred as your own word. Expansion ain't no excuse for persecuting a whole part of our people because their skins is red and they're uneducated to our ways. You wouldn't be doing the settlers no good voting for this bill. You'd only be making rich men out of the land grabbers and speculators that have been trying to get it passed. Now, just who are these scalawags? Well, one of them could be the president himself using this Congress for his own purpose. But I've known General Jackson for half of my born life, and I'm sure he's got nothing but the good of the country at heart. No, it's just a few thieving varmints hanging on by giving dinners and fancy parties, reaching for whatever they can get a hold of. But they're no count lot about as natural as flies around a molasses barrel. The real scallywags in this here capital of the brave and free is us, you and me. And I'm the worst of the lot. Reckon I've missed as many sessions as any of you, out shooting my mouth off when I should have been here tending to business. It's nobody's fault but our own if a bill like this gets passed. We got a responsibility to this strapping, fun-loving, britches-busting young bar cub of a country. We got a responsibility to help it grow into the kind of nation the good Lord meant it to be. If we riled up and showed that we were the kind of men our friends and neighbors figured we was when they sent us here, a bill like this would never live long enough to even get on our desk, let alone come to a vote.
So Davy storms out, and the cute little transition song tells us that he knew his career was over based on this, so he packed up and went back out into the world, at least for a little bit. On the deck of a steamboat, he tells Georgie that they should be heading to Texas to help the independence fight going on there. And Georgie has some of the best quotes of this movie so far about Davy's, decision to go to Texas and what's really there for him.
Texas independence threatened. General Santa Anna vows to expel settlers.
Texas? Why, we got the whole tarnal country to choose from, and you gotta pick. Well, there's nothing there but a mess of trouble.
Americans in trouble.
Yeah, a bunch of crazy fools are trying to take on a whole army. They're so far away from the rest of the country, they know they ain't gonna get no help. Bunch of rock-headed idiots that won't quit because they think they're right. How soon you reckon we'll be headed out that way?
Right after we get to Little Rock.
Which is true. First of all, Americans in trouble. Well, yeah. Who put them in trouble? It's not their land. Go away.
They didn't just stumble. Hey, what is this building? Let's go in here. Hey, get out of our mission.
Yeah.
No.
Look, Jack Skellington walking around and seeing a door and going, oh, what's going on in here, man? Yeah. Well, we have to save these people. They lit themselves on fire. The next scene is weird. It takes place in the Riverboat Bar, which we were just on the balcony of. And it's Davy, Georgie, the bartender, and a fancy lad who talks very, very flowery and eloquent. The man wants to come along with Davy on his journey because the law is chasing him. For reasons unknown, Davy agrees. And that's it. That's the scene.
For reasons unknown, the law is chasing him. Right. I don't understand this character, what we're doing. I feel like
we have no idea what his name is. He has a top hat, tails. That's it.
Yeah, he speaks in alliteration, like we're now in some sort of like a play.
Yes,
this movie takes a complete out to lunch couple of minutes. It's very weird.
The man he seems like a liability, and I thought it was very odd, because these two men are rough and tumble. Trappers, hunters, they wrestle bars, alligators, they don't care. And this man looks like he would be out of place if he didn't have gloves on. Like, he's just so sensitive. I wrote, it's like picking up a hitchhiker on your way to a fancy dress party. Like, he does not fit in with what you're doing. But Davy's like, sure, come along, man, whatever. So we montage our way through the plains and into Texas. Davy states that there's plenty of land enough for, quote, every dream he ever had. Okay. And the new guy sees the same brown hills, which, first of all, this is not footage of Texas, but that's okay. No. The new guy sees the same brown hills and calls it how he sees it.
Well, there she is. Texas. There's plenty of room out there for every dream I ever had.
Yeah, there's room, all right. Too much of it.
A desolate, desiccated desert, untouched by the hand of man and God alike.
I love that line so much. Untouched by man and God alike.
God alike.
This is so dramatic about it. This movie hates Texas. The three men hear a great rumbling and ascend a small hill to find out what it is. And apparently, it's a giant stampede of buffalo with one lone Native American giving chase. Davy notes that he's heading right for a prairie dog mound. And as he does, which by the way, this scene was pretty funny. It was really cute because what this movie has done throughout the course of the movie so far is whenever they're shooting animals or whatever, like there's a couple scenes of Davy and Georgie, like, oh, this is a good land to settle. But right before that, there's like a bunch of bears playing or whatever. And it's very clearly like footage that Walt got from the wildlife shorts that they were doing.
No,
for a
absolutely. It's that wonderful world of Disney animal stock footage.
Absolutely, yeah. But the prairie dog footage is kind of cute because they make the prairie dog into a character and then like kind of cut back and forth, and the prairie dog's like reacting to the buffalo stampede or whatever. And it's pretty funny. It's like very Disney and it's cute. But the brave is racing his horse towards the mound, doesn't see it, I guess, and his horse trips over it, and he throws. The horse throws the Native American to the ground, knocking him out in a way that would make any European soccer player proud. Well, Davy rushes to the fallen Native American side because he's just that kind of a guy. And as Davy tends to the man, the brave wakes up, grabs his knife, and tries to plant it firmly in Davy's back. Davy blocks him, knocks the knife out of his hand, and the two are now wrestling on the ground as Georgie and the new guy approach slowly. Georgie says something about Davy biting off more than he could chew, and Davy tells him to give him a hand, and that if they patch up this, quote, powerful lot of Indian, he'd make a good guide. So we're in Texas for a very short time, and already we're capturing and trafficking the locals. This is awesome.
What I love is his like Minecraft mentality about this. Hey, this guy, we patch him up, we'll turn him into a fine guide. Like his mind will just flip over. Oh yeah, no, I will be your guide now. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It's very World of Warcraft when you're like trying to hunt a new mount. You're like, oh, just tame animal. And then it's fine. Now the animal is yours and you feed it every now and then it grows closer to you.
Yeah, right.
It can heal faster. So our party is now increased by one. Back on the trail now, the newly expanded party encounters a small Mexican family who informs Davy that General Santa Anna has taken the settlement of San Antonio de Bejar, which is where the men were heading. Georgie asks where all the Texans are, and the Mexican man says they are at the Alamo, which is an old mission across the river, but warns them not to go there. The place is surrounded by Mexican soldiers, and there are patrols all over the place. Davy notes they got through Indian country without any trouble, except for the guy who tried to kill him, and they continue on the trail anyway. Like, it's fine. We've come this far. We're still alive. Let's just keep going and see how far we get.
Yeah, what is that? Man doesn't quit when he's winning.
That's true. Suddenly, they spot several shadows that appear on a hillside near them. Georgie, despite not being able to see any detail about these shadows whatsoever, says they don't look too friendly. And so the group takes off, and these shadows give chase. Turns out they're all Mexican soldiers, and they take to shooting after Davy and the crew. Over ravine, down steep trails, sometimes at 3x speed, they go. Cutting through a line of even more soldiers, the group is being shot at by its pursuers, but none of the shots have landed. On they ride, right towards the Alamo. From atop the wall, one man shouts, "Cover 'em!" And the other men around fire at the soldiers, instantly dropping two of them, which I found very funny because the Mexican army couldn't hit 4 men from 15 feet away with pistols, but the Texans could pick off 2 men from what had to be like 50 yards out.
Yeah.
And considering the first rifled musket barrel wouldn't be produced until 20 years after Davy's death, this was a wild feat. Like, that's why a lot of like shots at the time, especially like the Revolutionary War, like you had, wait until you see the whites of their eyes, that kind of famous quote.
Sure.
It's because the musket barrels weren't rifled, so they weren't accurate. They would just go off.
Fly wherever the hell.
Yeah, wherever they wanted to. It was a challenge to shoot anybody. But these guys, sharpshooters, man. Pachow.
Yeah. This is what they call a plot shot.
Entering the courtyard, Davy is approached by a man who gives him the grand tour, ending at the bedside of the great Jim Bowie, inventor of the Bowie knife.
That was a tight squeeze. You men all right?
Yeah, I reckon. You in command?
No, I'm second. Colonel Bowie's the commander.
Jim Bowie? The fellow that invented the knife?
That's him. Come on. He's been laid up. He took a fall helping us mount the cannon. The fever's been giving him the devil ever since. Colonel, we have some more reinforcements. I'll see your men are taken care of.
Thank you. Colonel Bowie?
Yeah.
I just brought a company in and I figured I ought to report. I'm Davy Crockett from Tennessee.
Davy Crockett. I should have known. By the great eternal, I never hoped to see you in this neck of the woods. Sit down, sit down. I can't get rid of this cough. Now tell me, how many men did you bring?
4, including myself.
4? 2 acres of wall to defend. It'd take at least 1,000 troops to man this garrison adequately, and I've got less than 200 volunteers.
200 stubborn men can do a tolerable lot of fighting.
Crockett, I'm going to be honest with you. This miserable excuse of a fort is our last chance. If we can't hold Santa Ana here until Houston reorganizes our army, Texas is lost.
Well, we'll just have to hold her.
Right. But just between you and me, I want to tell you what we're up against. You know, we're practically encircled. And on top of that, we don't have enough rations left for a good-sized family dinner back home. Powder? Well, there's just about enough left for a turkey shoot. I don't have to tell you, Davy, that none of this goes outside this room.
Sure, Colonel. These 200 you got?
Yeah.
Ain't there any more Texans around?
Well, we've been sending messengers out. One did get back from Gonzales with 32 men. Now, there's a fair-sized force down at Goliad. We sent a courier out a few days ago, but I don't think he made it.
Got a fresh horse? I'll take a crack at getting through.
No, Davy, we need your breed of men here. Half horse, half alligator. We both know the amount of powder in the gun's not near as important as the spirit of the man behind the sights.
Half any battle's knowing you're going to win.
Crockett, for the first time since I've been here, I believe we can hold out.
And old Betsy here and this here Arkansas toothpick of yourn, how can we lose?
I can tell you. I can tell you exactly. My favorite part is like he brings 4 people and no supplies. So it's just like an extra 4 people.
Yeah, he's really just a burden.
He really is. But the grim situation doesn't faze Davy at all, and it takes him about 0.764 seconds to decide, yep, this is for me. So Davy gets up and heads for the basement of the Alamo, where he looks around for the perfect place to hide this big red bicycle he stole. No, wait, sorry, wrong movie. Time is compressed here as we fade into another scene with our party on position at the wall along with several other men. Looking out at the Mexican army, Georgie notes that every morning there's twice as many as the night before. And it's an intimidating sight, even if it is hand painted, right? Like the matte painting is you know, you put yourself in the position of the men at the Alamo. It's very intimidating. You have rows and rows and rows of white canvas tents, plumes of smoke all across the plains, and hundreds of little blue blobs that are, you know, representing the army, right? A rider approaches the fort, and Davy wonders why Santa Anna called for a truce and sent a rider to carry a message in the first place. They have 2,000 men out there to the fort's less than 200. The rider carries a parchment that reads that the fort must surrender or else. And Davy says, well, I ain't much of an authority on surrendering. And the other guy says, neither am I. Very, very tough stuff here, guys.
Very brave folks.
Yeah, brave. Sometimes the line between brave and idiocy is very, very blurred. As a response to the offer of surrender, the fort fires their cannon at the troops, kicking off a battle that lasts well into the night. Or at least on the set of the fort. The soldiers are stuck shooting day for night. So, you know, that's kind of how that goes.
Sure.
It's the next day, and the Mexican army have actually managed to hit the fort for once, and which is cool. That's great. We get a small comedic exchange that I kind of rather enjoyed here. This is between Georgie and the new guy.
They say that war is the most exalted experience a man can endure. To me, it's the most miserable and untheatrical method of suicide.
Shelled us all night and shelled us all day. Ain't hit a man yet.
You ain't got nothing to worry about, Thimble Rig. Ain't nobody gonna hit you. You're too shifty.
But we also learned the new man's name, Thimble Rig. And I honestly couldn't tell if that was his name or if that's like some kind of dig. You know, like, oh, you're a thimble rig. You know what I mean? I just didn't know because it doesn't sound like a real man's name. Thimble Rig?
Well, And I had to do this in reverse where I had to go look up the guy's name in IMDb and then I watched this scene again.
Yeah.
And so when Georgie says his name, it was like, oh, okay. I actually heard it that time.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't hear it the first time.
Yeah. So along with more time compression between scenes, a lull in the shelling finally hits, and the general talks to Davy, saying it's now been 4 days of shelling and not one casualty, which is, pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It's nighttime again on the wall. Georgie approaches Davy and lets him know that he doesn't really think help is going to come. Davy finally spills the beans to him that he knew there wasn't a way out of this fight from the day they got there. Well, you can imagine Georgie's kind of a bit pissed off, and he storms off to go see the colonel about trying to break through the lines and to go to get the men some help. The colonel puts up virtually no objection to this and says he'll have Colonel Bowie's horse saddled up for him, which reminded me back when Davy first got to the fort and offered his services as the messenger in the first scene. I just didn't mention it, right? And it was told that they needed men of his caliber there at the fort, which I guess means Georgie's dispensable because they need Davy Crockett at the fort, but Georgie, you can go. You can go scramble on, try to get more people. It's fine.
He said it like this. He's like, oh, really, dude? Oh, yeah. You know what? That would be good. Like, if you could do that, that's actually really good. That's cool.
Anyway, he gets on his horse. He flies from the fort with the other men looking on from the wall. Georgie is winding through the little dry riverbed as fast as he can, cutting in and out. It's very dramatic. And somehow manages to ride right through a small camp of Mexican soldiers who instantly start firing on him. Davy watches from the wall with the same look on his face as he's had the entire movie up to this point, which is one of sheer ambivalence. He's looking, this is a thing that's happening in front of me and I'm not processing it at all. We fade up to daytime with Colonel telling David not to worry about Georgie. He's only been gone 2 days. So again, time moves fast here. And anyway, he'd have to wait for darkness to come back in order for Georgie to come in.
Sure.
Darkness, not nighttime, not the cover of, but just straight. He has to wait for darkness to come back. It's like we literally are cavemen going, darkness, come back, then safe to go out of cave.
Well, it might be daylight savings time. It gets dark at 5 p.m. That's not night.
We don't know. Suddenly, a cannonball lands behind the wall and explodes. 4 soldiers had moved a cannon closer to the wall without any of the lookouts noticing this. And we're getting ready to launch another volley, but Davy takes them out with his rifle. Darkness finally comes back. And here comes Georgie, riding like hell for the Alamo. Somehow, he crosses the same small camp of Mexicans coming back in as he did going out, which is very funny to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, he tells the colonel that Goliad can't spare any more men. And the colonel says it's time to tell the rest of the men that they're borked. They're absolutely shafted.
Yep.
So Davy goes to tell Bowie, who is still in bed, and Bowie reckons he should be out there with the men when they get the bad news. So Davy has 2 guys haul this poor sick man out into the yard, still on his bed. Like they lift the whole bed up and shift it out to the courtyard, while the other colonel gives a unifying speech. And we're at men here.
They're like, listen, I need to drum this home. How screwed we are. I'm gonna lay out on this bed as a symbol of how bad things are.
I've called you all together because it's time you knew the truth. Russell brings bad news, men. The defense of the Alamo rests on us alone. General Santa Anna has nearly 5,000 men massed against us. Now, I can't force you beyond patriotism and your own conscience. While it's still dark, there's time to slip off to safety. I won't blame any man who doesn't stay.
The classic line in the sand, So the colonel draws a line with his sword and has everybody step across. And of course, everybody does. Why not? So after that scene, the men are back on the wall and Georgie is strumming his little mandolin that we kind of see every now and then. And he bullies Davy into playing a song that Davy wrote. It's the only one he ever wrote, he says. And I thought I would include it just for posterity because it's Fess Parker singing this.
All right.
The only one you ever read. Fellers like it, too.
Farewell to the mountains, whose mazes to me were more beautiful far than Eden could be. The home I redeemed from the savage and wild. The home I have loved as a father.
And it goes on and on. Very beautiful, Fast. Good job.
Yeah, it's nice.
All the men start slowly singing along to the song they just heard for the very first time. Then everybody lays down for some nighty-night resty times. But not too much, because one of the scouts on the wall spot the advancing Mexican army by saying, "They're on to us," he shouts. And the last stand of the Alamo begins. And I'm going to do everyone a favor. I'm not going to describe the battle too much because it's a standard battle scene. There's shots being fired. There's screams off scene. There's bugles. But I'll hit some highlights. The Mexican soldiers throw these kind of homemade ladders against the wall and they try to climb it, only to be pushed away for the most part. Cannonballs explode all around the Alamo, except for the one that strikes the outer wall and bounces off, doing absolutely no damage and leaving no mark. I don't know if you saw that one.
That too, yeah.
It's like, why are we doing this? The men either run out of powder, which was low even before all this started, or they didn't have time to reload their muskets because they suddenly turn their weapons into clubs, beating the soldiers as they advance over the wall. The Mexican soldiers have breached the north wall, and as the Texans swing the cannon around to defend it, the front gates are penetrated and a steady stream of blue-coated soldiers pour into the fort. Georgie is shot in the arm, it looks like, but manages to fire the cannon one last time, killing like 5 men.
Yeah.
We check in on Colonel Bowie, who's back inside his room now, still in his bed, holding 2 flintlock pistols pointed at the door. The Mexican army breaks his door down, and as they enter, he unloads both muskets right into the advancing men. They swarm over him in his bed, and as they do, he pulls out his big signature knife and stabs one in the back. A savage way to go, man.
That's so boss.
Yeah, I know, right? Davy goes to check on Georgie, who, with his last breath, says, "Give him what for, Davy?" Then rolls over and dies. Up the steps come the Mexican army after Davy, and Davy stands tall, clubbing the men with his rifle as they get after him. You fade out and into the handwritten journal that says March 6th, 1836, Liberty and Independence Forever. And the theme song tells us that as long as we remember the Alamo, the memories of these men that died will live on forever. The end. So let's take a break, Matt. And when we come back, I want to chat about who Davy Crockett really was, because I will tell you, this movie came nowhere near giving us the highlights of this dude's life. And it's not, we've already been going like an hour and a half. I'm not going to get too in depth into it, but just looking him up in a precursor, formation or whatever.
Sure.
This dude lived a life, man. It was really, and honestly, I found his real life more interesting than the like kind of make believe life that we just, watched and read about. So
yeah.
Hang on, everybody. We're going to be right back here talking about Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier on the Buena Vista Boys. All right, thanks for hanging on, everybody. We are back. We're chatting about Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, but we're going to be talking more about his actual life in this little tiny segment. Then we're going to get to the facts segment that Matt so carefully and diligently puts together each and every show.
Oh my gosh, crafted with love.
Yeah. So I want to just hit some of the highlights of Davy Crockett's actual life before a lot of these lore threads and songs and books were written that just kind of weren't really based in anything known as Davy Crockett's reality, right? So just some highlights, just some brief things that I found really notable. And I got all of this information from this really great blog. It's called briancrandall.com. But he put this whole timeline called Davy Crockett Timeline from 1786 to 1836 and beyond. So, for example, Davy Crockett's uncle, Jimmy, was captured by Native Americans and kept for for 17 years until Davy's father, John, was able to buy him back from an Indian trader.
Whoa.
Yeah. And apparently Uncle Jimmy spent his remaining years being called Dumb Jimmy, as he was never really the same mentally, while trying to find the silver and gold mines that he was supposedly kept in while captive. So being captured by the Native Americans changed this man, made him completely just checked out of reality. Certain he was kept in silver and gold mines and spent the rest of his life trying to find those.
Yeah, this is a early level of disassociation.
Yeah.
PTSD.
Another one, Davy wrote in his journals that his earliest memory was one day he was playing with... Davy wrote in his journals that his earliest memory was this little story. One day he was playing with his older brothers by the river when he was about 5 or 6. His 4 older brothers and another friend set off on a canoe, leaving Davy behind. This upset him so much that when the canoe drifted off to a nearby waterfall, he was less than sympathetic. This is a quote from Davy Crockett's journal. He says, quote, I was so infernal mad that they had left me on the shore that I had as soon as have seen them all go over the falls a bit as any other way. So he's like, I was so pissed off they left me. I'd rather them go over the hill or go over the waterfall. But apparently a neighbor at the last minute saw the children in this precarious situation, stripped down, ran to the rescue, and saved the canoe from going over those little falls. Psychopathic.
Yeah, well, or practical.
Or
I mean,
practical,
he's like,
that's true.
listen, we're in the Wild West. We have lots of mouths to feed. Honestly, if 4 go missing, that's more bear meat for me.
Here's another one. As a child, Davy was hired out to local farmers as child labor since his parents were so poor, which apparently this was people did back in the day to pay off family debt. Like if you
that's why you had 48 kids.
That's why you had 48 kids. Yeah. Because you could hire them out to local farms. Like, okay, here's my 8-year-old son.
That's our business.
And this guy, apparently the farm that Davy was hired out to, Davy hated it so much he just ran away for like 4 days. Like he just like peaced out. He's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So anyway, eventually Davy came back and reconciled with his family and whatever. So as a young man, about 15, Davy was working at the farm of a local Quaker, again, to pay off more family debt. One night when this Quaker was at a church gathering, Davy and another man who he was working with hid a long pole in their second-story room. I don't know how. At night when the Quaker was asleep, the 2 men would climb out the window. Borrowing the Quaker's horses, they would ride 10 miles to meet Davy's love interest and her sister. They carried out this romance in the night for some time until Crockett finally proposed to her. She accepted, and they planned out their wedding. On the day that the 2 were supposed to be wed, Crockett was horrified to find out that the young woman was set to wed another young man on the same day.
Man.
So he was just being played for something. I don't know what.
Dude, 304s, even in the 1800s. Wow. Wow.
We talked at the beginning about the Fort Mims massacre, which kicked off a big wave of local militias and settlers battling back against the Indians. Apparently, that fight, that massacre, the Fort Mims massacre, could have gone a totally different way if it wasn't for maintenance issues. As the Red Sticks attacked the fort, the militiamen moved into position and prepared for the siege, but one of the gates that had been ill attended to was stuck open by accumulated sand. Ultimately, the battle resulted in the killing and scalping of more than 400 settlers. With the regular army preoccupied with the British, the settlers who lived among the Indians were left to fend for themselves. Militiamen of various counties assembled and formed a makeshift army of farmers and hunters. Andrew Jackson is immediately appointed to lead a 2,500-strong West Tennessee army. And that's the army that Davy Crockett was scouting for.
Yeah, that's what the movie opened with.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine that the gates were just open all the time, and then wind blew the sand and just couldn't close the door in time. And they're supposed to be clearing the sand and just nobody did it.
Yeah. Because who cares?
Yeah, well,
it's the 1800s.
But this is why, right? Like you got to make sure the door closes, brother.
I'm sure they didn't have a prison or anything there. Like who gives a crap?
Davy remarried after his first wife died of the flu. With her savings, the two were able to move to a new plot of land near the Tennessee River at a place called Shoal Creek. There, he constructed a grist mill, a distillery, and a gunpowder factory. So this man owned a gunpowder factory at one point.
Yeah. See, here's the thing. You call it a gunpowder factory. It's probably 2 tables of people grinding up crap. Like, hey man, that's a factory.
That's a factory, but yeah, absolutely. He had one, a distillery and a gunpowder. Those two they shouldn't go together.
Tennessee.
They shouldn't go together. Well, right. You're born into.
Here's the thing. I think you can't get land unless you promise to build a distillery. It's actually part of like the process.
I think so too. Yeah.
You have to have a distillery attachment or you can't build on the land.
That's why Western expansion had to happen. They had to introduce the Native Americans to distillation.
Absolutely.
These people don't even know that you can distill grain. And the last little one I had was, I thought was kind of funny. By the time Davy is elected to Congress, which by the way, he was elected twice. As a representative for Tennessee and then I think Kentucky later on. So after he refused to sign the Indian bill and left Congress, he moved out west, then got elected to Congress to represent some of the Western states, and he went back. But it's like all the stuff the movie doesn't even touch on.
Yeah. No, so there's too much. There's too much.
Yeah,
is the problem. Yeah, there's way too much.
By the time he's elected to Congress, Davy is in so much debt, with spending most of his time away from his family hunting. Not only to avoid the tensions at home from being in debt, but to also hide from debt collectors and taxmen. So he would go out hunting because that's the only thing he knew how to do. So he had to make money, right? Because nothing else was making money. So he would do that and he would just stay out longer and longer and longer because his wife was like, I had savings. I don't have savings anymore. Thanks, David. You know what I mean? So in the movie, they tried to make Davy look kind of like a fish out of water when he's in Congress. But with this fact in mind, I think they could have done so much more about, like, he was a poor person. I read a quote in this blog where
and like poor-minded person.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, I read a quote in this blog where Davy's talking about helping other people because there's like one, I don't know, I can't remember, some story about like he found a fresh kill on the ground and he stole it and then he used it to like feed one of his neighbors, something like that. I don't know. Whatever. But the point is, he gave a quote where it was like, I believe that you basically should help other people no matter what, and I do that, which is why I've been poor my whole life. Which is kind of like a nice sentiment where it's like I could be richer, but I give to other people and I help people, and that's that's what you should be doing. I don't know. So I thought it was really interesting where it's like he was so poor that's part of the reason why he came to Congress in his buckskin. He had no clothes. He couldn't afford like the fancy suits, but the movie made it seem like he came in a costume.
Yeah, but like he was coming to do a bit.
Yeah, but that's what he had on. That's what he had. I don't know. It's super interesting. So go ahead.
No, but I'd read something like that too. I can't remember what the context was, but basically, I think when he was in the army, as it were, he stole money when he needed to buy something. He would steal the money from people that to buy the supplies that he needed. So there is sort of this history of him stealing, like not in like a bad way. He's not, like a master criminal, but like stealing was not below him.
Yeah. Agreed. Anyway, that's Davy Crockett. That's the man, compared to the myth. And, like we said, it's not that he was this special person, but I did think that it was very rare for the time for having to have anybody stand up for Native American rights, as it were. Like I said, he was more of a man who honored the deal than either side of it. This was the deal that was brokered, therefore that's the law, no matter what.
Yeah,
which there is some level of respect there. Obviously, things should have gone down way differently. But in order to, someone taking a stand against his, longtime friend, Andrew Jackson, and the whole of Congress, and saying, I'm not going to sign, this is garbage. What are we doing to these people? These are just normal people who just might not understand our ways. That, you know, I thought that was pretty, which happened. That was a real part of it. And, you know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's probably the closest they get to reality.
Yeah, grid down a bar.
And it is. It's really, sometimes when you read about people and you find out that things were like, oh, this was nothing like this. This person didn't, this is completely fictionalized. This movie made up 80% of this person's life. I think this is one of those situations where the parts that were made up were like entertaining, but the parts that were real were actually kind of heartening because he really did have, for the most part, I think he had best intentions for the country and all the people that lived in it, not just people that looked like him, but everybody.
Yeah.
But he was a flawed individual like anybody else, like we are now. We're flawed people. You know, people were flawed back then. He clearly didn't mind stealing, you know, and it is what it is. But it is nice to know that even way back then, there were people who were like, this is wrong. We all should be living together. The best America is one where we're all having a piece of land and we're all feeling safe.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I got. It's your turn now.
Oh, okay. Oof. All right. Well, I ain't want much for speechifying, but so my section is facts, fiction, and tall tales. Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, was released to theaters May 25th, 1955. Now, what people who lived back then might have noticed is that this movie is actually a edited together feature-length film from the television miniseries called Davy Crockett. Walt Disney had adapted Davy Crockett's stories into a television show for Walt Disney's Disneyland, which ran from 1954 when the show started to 1958. And I thought it was interesting to know that the show, you know, Walt Disney's Disneyland, was sort of set up to be this long running commercial for Disneyland for when it came out. And
genius marketing.
Yeah, no. And this portion would clearly like feature bits from the future Tomorrowland, or no, it's not future Tomorrowland. Sorry. The future Frontierland.
There you go.
I said future and I thought Tomorrowland. You have this character, Davy Crockett, wearing his cap. You know, you have that beautiful, catchy ballad of Davy Crockett is the theme song. And so they took all these pieces, Davy Crockett, Indian fighter, Davy Crockett goes to Congress, Davy Crockett at the Alamo, and turned it into a movie that they then released in theaters. And I thought,
it makes sense now. Knowing that, it makes sense why it's so jumbled, why time seems to not make any sort of sense, because it wasn't written as a movie. It was written as a series over a year. And so, so it makes tons of sense now. Like I get it.
Yeah. When you put that together, these sections not really having any connective tissue absolutely makes sense.
Yeah. Which is also pretty clever. The way they used the song, the Ballad of Davy Crockett, pulled out those relevant pieces and used those as the joiners to glue the basically the chapters of the movie together.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too, because once you kind of know this, the section called Davy Crockett and the Alamo, clearly that last portion, it makes sense why it really feels like there's these cartoonish characters that kind of show up in a movie that was a little bit more flat in the first two episodes, like where characters are kind of even keeled. Now, all of a sudden you've got this riverboat gambler. You've got this, this Native American gentleman who, like, you know, doesn't talk and has these wild big eyes and makes these over, like, you know, these gestures that are just wild and outlandish. And so it kind of makes sense when you feel the disjointedness. You're like, well, yeah, because this lives with like its own episode.
Yeah.
And they actually had 5 parts to the series where they took the other 2 parts of this and made it into Davy Crockett and the River Pirates a year later.
Oh, geez.
And that's where they introduced Mike Fink and the keel boats and all that. And I thought it was interesting, and we'll get to how Walt felt about this, but I thought it was funny that in episode 3, Davy Crockett and the Alamo, that's when he bites it. And then they do 2 episodes after that. I don't know who was writing this show, but the budget for this show or this movie was $700,000. At the box office, it made $2,150,000. So that's not bad.
Can you imagine just from stuff you already got?
Yeah, exactly. From something that had already been on television that people could have already have seen.
Yeah.
It obviously set off a powder keg of Davy Crockett mania, which we'll get to. But yeah, the show had already sort of primed the pump, and then the movie coming out, that really put it out there. Walt said that if he'd known the success of Davy Crockett was going to be so big, he wouldn't have killed him off in the 3rd episode of the TV show.
Yeah.
So Buddy Ebsen, who played the tall tale telling, wife smooching Georgie Russell, was going to play Davy Crockett until Walt Disney saw Fess Parker in the movie Them from 1954, which is a movie about giant mutant ants.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's classic. And people, in horror movies always have the big Them poster. It's very prominent. And when he saw Parker, he said, "That's my Davy Crockett." And I would agree.
Yeah,
actually.
that sucks for Buddy Ebsen. So he got relegated to playing Georgie. And what I read about Georgie, who was based on a real character too, a real person who was Davy's real friend. Georgie was a lot younger than Davy in real life.
Oh, really?
But here, Buddy Ebsen's clearly very much older.
Yeah.
Which I don't know why I found that interesting, but I did.
And I kind of get that.
Too.
And I think it works a little bit because I think there's times in the movie when Buddy Ebsen's character seems to have a little bit more of like the signaling and the tracking locked in than like he seems like a guy who has probably been in the backwoods a little bit longer than Davy. Davy has a certain set of charm and a good mind about him.
Yeah.
That Georgie doesn't have, but I think Georgie has some really great locked in backwoods skill. And that's why they play really well together. This is called A Theme Song So Nice They Made It Thrice, which actually they made it way more than that. But the theme song has been remade more times than Batman.
Jeez.
The Ballad of Davy Crockett was written with music by George Bruns and lyrics by Thomas W. Blackburn, who also wrote this movie. And he wrote a lot of other movies, all Westerns. I didn't name them because they're Western movies. We get it.
Yeah.
The version we heard in the opening of this movie is done by the Wellingtons, and they're the same band that sings the Gilligan's Island theme song.
That's cool, man.
Right? It's pretty great.
Yeah.
And Fess Parker, Tennessee Ernie Ford, and Bill Hayes all had versions of this song out in 1955. So picture this. You have Hayes's version of this song makes it to number 1 on the weekly chart for March 26th through April 23rd. It's number 7 for the year. Parker's version reaches number 6 on the weekly chart, and it's number 31 for the year. While Tennessee Ernie Ford's peaks at number 4 on the weekly charts, and it's number 5. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's on the weekly country charts, and it's number 5 on the weekly pop charts, but it ultimately charted for the year at number 37. A theme song for a backwater television show is making the top charts in this country.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. So you got 3 guys who've covered this. They're charting. And then a 4th version was done by bluegrass singer Mac Wiseman, and he reached number 10 on the radio charts in May of 1955. So 5 different men all charted with this song. I listened to all of them.
Okay.
And I've got to say, Bill Hayes absolutely deserves that number one spot. Like, his has a charm that the other ones just don't have. Fess Parker is a great singer. I have no problem with him. Tennessee Ernie Ford, he feels like he is just walking through a paycheck on this song.
And he was.
And then Mac Wiseman, it's like, I actually like his song, but it's slow and it feels very country. And I feel like he tried to do a good job with it, because he is a bluegrass singer, but it's just not there like the Bill Hayes version. That one is poppy.
Yeah.
It's very palatable for a range of audience.
Nice.
Louis Armstrong recorded this song in 1968.
Jeez.
The Hayes version went to the UK. It got to number 2 in the New Musical Express chart. And then it was covered by a handful of UK artists over there. And a French version by Annie Cordy was number 1 for 5 weeks in France in 1956.
The world had Davy Crockett fever, man.
They're going wild. They're going crazy. Okay. The best version, of course, is the version Henry sings at the end of the Country Bear Jamboree. He sings it with a live raccoon hat on his head. In Back to the Future, the Fess Parker version of this song is playing on the jukebox in Lou's Diner when Marty walks in. So he's like, he gets to Hill Valley in 1955. He's looking around. He goes into Lou's Diner. It's right there on the jukebox. They even kind of cut to the jukebox a little bit so you can hear some of it. And then on the street, when you're looking at this record store, they have this A-frame. And it says on the A-frame, the ballad just arrived, the ballad of Davy Crockett, 16 tons, many more. And the 16 tons is done by Tennessee Ernie Ford.
Classic song.
Yeah. And so it's like, I don't know if they were kind of trying to get multiple versions of the song like in there, because like Tennessee Ernie Ford covered that song. He covered 16
maybe
tons.
like a nod. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they got the Fess Parker version in there.
Cute.
And then later, obviously, in that same movie, you have the son or the brother of Lorraine. Lorraine's brother's wearing a coonskin cap at the dinner table. But Bill Hayes, I thought this was interesting, temporarily gave up singing in 1970 due to a bout of laryngitis. He auditioned for the role of Doug Williams on the long-running soap opera Days of Our Lives and kept that role from 1970 to 2012.
Jesus. Good gravy, dude.
What a pivot.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
I love that.
So we played that bit from the song Farewell in the movie. And Farewell, the lyrics in that are from a real poem written by David Crockett called Farewell to the Mountains. I found an article by Austin P. Foster in the Tennessee Historical Magazine, Volume 9, Number 3, from October 1925, reporting that the poem was written sometime after Crockett was leaving politics, after growing disillusion by the government's actions towards indigenous people. He lost his seat in 1835, so the poem would have been written around that time. So I thought it was interesting. If you ever get to read the entire poem, it's actually really nice.
It is, yeah, and they do a decent job. I don't know if they sing the whole thing because there's different refrains or whatever the term is, but yeah, it seems like a well written. Like I get it. It's a very nice, very much an ode to Tennessee.
Yeah, I don't know how many poems David Crockett has written in his whole life, but this one was pretty darn good. Crockett Mania got us all in furry caps. 1955 was besieged with buckskin and coonskin cap merch as far as the eye could see. It felt like every toy company was getting into the act. Daisy, makers of the Red Ryder BB gun, came out with a slew of gear to help young pioneers tame the wild Tennessee wilderness. Special rifles, powder horns, draped in fringe, and buckskin wrapped canteens. I didn't send a picture of it, but I was looking through all of these old advertisements from the time.
Yeah.
And they have this round canteen that is wearing a buckskin shirt. Like, it's pretty rad.
That's awesome.
There was Davy Crockett magic slates.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that you would draw, you would push into that black. It was a plastic cover,
mm-hmm.
and you use a little plastic pen to push into like that black wax.
Yeah.
And then you lift the plastic up and you can erase.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. And so they made those. They had what's called a Peter puppet. And it's a certain brand of marionette, and they had a coonskin capped Crockett one that looked really cool. They had a swing set where the swings were horses.
Okay,
that was a special Davy Crockett swing set.
My God.
You could get bed sets, PJs, Topps bubblegum cards, comic books. They made golden books about Davy Crockett. Disney had all the records, right, with the theme song in it and everything. They had probably 5 or 6 different versions and with covers of the theme song of the Ballad of Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was slapped on nearly everything. Over $100 million in merchandise was sold in the first 3 months. At the height of the craze, 5,000 coonskin caps were sold each day.
See, and that is where Disney has always been ahead of the game. And that is that's why Walt was able to fund his studios early on, is because he knew the power of merchandising.
Yeah.
And he sold Mickey, and Mickey was on every single thing he could be put on from the jump. And it carried through. And this is exactly what, over $100 million in merch in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
All of these people, if they're not making it, they're licensing it. Like they're on board with everything. And that's why you see so much nonsense ever, because people buy it. It's crazy.
Well, and what's funny is I can confirm this too. Like, because it's one thing to like read about it and go, oh, that's a thing that happened.
Yeah.
I was talking with my dad 2 days ago about covering this show and how we watched the movie. And he confirms that, he's like, when I went to Disneyland when I was a kid, he's like, you don't leave Disneyland without a coonskin cap. He's like, so he admitted that was the expectation, is you'd go there, you definitely leave with a coonskin cap for sure.
Absolutely. I get that.
So
yeah,
it's not just one of those things where we have a perception of it. It's like that really did happen. And so that's the mania that is Davy Crockett in the world. And now here's some interesting things about sort of the actors who were in this movie that were kind of fun. Andrew Jackson was around 45 or 47 when he warred against Red Stick. But Basil Rydell, the actor who played the general at the very beginning, was 77 when he made this movie.
How rude.
And I read this, and then I watched the movie again, and I noticed they seem like they really were putting that dark brown dye in his hair at the beginning of this movie. When you go back and watch it again, there is crudded brown in this guy's hair, trying to bring him back a few years.
That's awesome.
And then Helen Stanley, who played Polly Crockett, Davy's wife, was born Dolores Diane Freymouth. And that's, how did she get to Helen Stanley from that?
It was like a whole thing where she like started acting name. And she was like, I'm just going to be Helen Stanley. And there was no explanation. I'm like, okay, cool.
So her first role was in the film called Girls Town in 1948. She was the live action model of Disney's animated classic heroine Cinderella. And once you hear that, you kind of can't unsee it. She has very theatrical movements. She has the thin body.
Yeah.
And she does have a very drawable character body.
Sure, absolutely.
She was such a good model that in 1959, she was called back to model Aurora in Sleeping Beauty. And if that wasn't enough, in 1961, she returned again to model Anita in 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah.
And
crazy.
I love that.
Yeah. 2 things about this. Number 1, there's multiple movies called Girls Town. Mystery Science Theater 3000 covered a movie called Girls Town with Mel Torme. And I thought maybe that was it, but it's not, which I was like, I was going to be really pleased, but it wasn't. But also, so apparently there's like a behind the scenes thing about Cinderella. And in it, and I haven't seen it, but in it, there's movie footage of Helen Stanley doing ballet and doing these grand movements. So the artists can sit and draw her, moving and stuff like that. And,
nice.
Man, Hollywood back then, all you had to do was just do one thing well and then hang around, and you just got tons and tons of gigs, apparently. Because, I mean, how many other people are in Hollywood who could model for that? But now they called her back 3 times for Disney projects.
Yeah,
I love that.
And that's fun when you can find footage like that too, like the footage of the girl playing Alice. So that they could figure draw Alice, or what is it? The gentleman who plays the Mad Hatter.
Yeah.
The footage of him kind of doing his own thing. He's just sitting there and he's just making stuff up about the tea.
Yeah.
And so that they can get a kind of a baseline for figure drawing. I love that stuff.
Yeah,
That's
it's pretty
really
neat.
fun.
Yeah.
Mike Mazurki. I'm terrible with last names, everyone. But I even tried to pre-read this. Mazurki's the best I can get.
Yeah.
So I hope that's his name.
Mike Mazurki. There you go.
He's the one who played Bigfoot. He was actually a lawyer and a professional wrestler. I could have guessed that.
Professional wrestler, yes. Lawyer, no. Or maybe the other way around. I don't know.
Surprisingly, they are the lawyer. I would have said son of garbage man and professional wrestler.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, no, he definitely had the look of like a guy who's like, I got you for 2 rounds. Hey. But he was typecast much of his career due to him being 6'5", which is crazy because I read that and then we were watching those Bigfoot scenes just now.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell that he's that tall. 6'5" is so tall.
That's how tall I am.
Yeah.
I'm 6'5", and I'm like,
crazy.
damn, you don't run into many people who are as tall as I am.
No, and that's nuts because I'm 6'1", and I'm sort of a mid level of some of our friends. My friend Andy, who we do the Shelter from Oblivion with, he's a shorter guy.
Yeah.
And so I always kind of feel tall, but then I get around my other friends and they're like 6'2", 6'3", and I'm like, I'm a little fella.
Yeah.
But it's still, all of those are very talls, and it's crazy big, and having that husky voice, I could see him only getting certain types of roles. He's not going to be a doctor, ma'am,
or a love interest. Yeah.
Yeah. So he played a couple of roles in Daniel Boone's TV series. Totally awesome. As well as bit parts in the Rockford Files, Gilligan's Island, and more. Gilligan's Island, I could see him being some.
And the Rockford Files. I could see him going, Rockford. I got you,
Gilligan's
Rockford.
Island. Yeah, boat sank over there.
I love the Rockford Files. God bless, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that show's so good.
Great theme song, too.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful theme song. So, Thimblerig. Thimblerig. See, I kind of like Thimblerig.
Thimblerig, yeah. Well, that sounds like a Tolkien name.
The riverboat.
The hobbits in Thimblerig went to remove the ring from
This is a terrible name. They couldn't have just called him Roy. What?
David. Yeah, right? Like, whatever, man.
I don't understand this character. I don't know why he exists. I don't know why they had to name him something so weird. Anyway, he's the riverboat gambler with a penchant for alliteration and a voice like he stumbled out of a Tex Avery cartoon. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is also the voice of Captain Hook in Disney's 1953 Peter Pan.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And you cannot unhear it. That's what's freaking me out. Is he's saying Aborigine? And it's like, yeah, you said that same thing in Peter Pan.
That's probably why he said it. So I'm like, Aborigine? Who says that?
He can converse with that Aborigine. God, that character is so ridiculous. Kenneth Tobey, who played Jim Sweaty Bowie.
Mm-hmm.
So sweaty in that movie.
He had a fever. I mean, what's he? And
I know.
Texas, and he had
he
had a fever, and he had a buckskin jacket on.
Yes.
It's like, what are you guys doing?
I know, and it's just so greasy and sweaty, and he looked perfectly sick. It was great.
Oh, he's about to deep fry himself. Like he's ready to be cooked, man.
He has over 200 film and TV credits, and they run across all genres. He's born in Oakland, California in 1912.
Let's go.
That's why you added this.
That's exactly why I added this. Absolutely.
He was in a lot of early 50s horror films like It Came From Beneath the Sea, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Which sounds like the same movie. It sounds like one could be a subtitle of the other.
I would not be surprised if they recycled the sets.
I know.
Different actors, basically the same sets.
Yeah.
Oh, he was also in classics such as Airplane, where he played air controller Neubauer. And Gremlins, I got to watch Gremlins again.
Yeah.
Is an uncredited gas station attendant.
It's on our Christmas movie rotation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely watch it because I need to get the kids to watch Gremlins again so that I can make them watch Gremlins 2 again. I need context for one. The sheriff in Big Top Pee-wee, awesome. The projectionist in Gremlins 2, love it.
Yeah.
This guy's coming back around.
Yeah.
And Smitty in Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
So, I thought it was neat because number one, Airplane is one of the greatest comedies ever written.
Yeah,
that movie rocks so hard. And, and then he was in some pretty big, relatively recent movies.
Yeah.
I thought it was neat.
You get into, I'm trying to remember the name of the director, but because he did my favorite movie, The Burbs. But it's like, if you get in good with him, he always has a place for you in other movies.
I love that.
You know what I mean?
Like Tarantino, man.
Yeah. Yeah. If you give him something, he'll put you in as something somewhere. He'll have you tearing tickets in the background. He'll give you a one throwaway line.
That's what I need, man. That's what I need. Just some constant work. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, right. It's just he'll have you going like, this popcorn sucks. That's it. That's it for you. So this one was one of mine because you always in these movies find this weird thing that you're like, how is this a thing? And this was an actor who was in the movie for just like a few minutes, but yet they have this crazy, wonderful history that needs to be shared. So the Native American named Busted Luck. He is the person that Davy Crockett's gonna make a good guide out of.
Oh yeah. The traffic young man.
Yeah, he doesn't have a name, but then Buddy Ebsen's character says, "Hey, this guy's got busted luck," and that became his credit. He's credited as Busted Luck.
All right.
And he was played by a guy named Nicholas Kucha, and his stage name is Nick Kravitz.
Okay.
And so Nick and Burt Lancaster first met as young boys at summer camp in New York, forming a lifelong friendship. So this guy meets Burt Lancaster as a young boy, and they're best buddies. In the early 1930s, they created an acrobatic duo called Lang and Kravitz. And eventually joining K Brothers Circus. So Burt Lancaster is doing acrobatics with this other gentleman in a circus in the 30s in Florida. The two friends performed together in various circuses and vaudeville acts until 1939 when Lancaster injured his hand, ending their acrobatic career. They would reunite later in Hollywood, where Kravitz co-starred alongside Lancaster in 9 films, including The Flame and the Arrow, 1950, The Crimson Pirate, 1952, Run Silent, Run Deep, which I've heard of, 1958, The Scalp Hunters, 1968, and The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1977. Awesome. Kravitz often portrayed mute characters, including in The Flame and the Arrow, the Crimson Pirate, and David Crockett's King of the Wild Frontier. And in the TV series The Count of Monte Cristo, largely because of his thick Brooklyn accent. Because he couldn't get over that accent. He's a great actor, but he couldn't overcome his accent. So you can't have this guy.
Is he a great actor then? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, the Countess wants to see you.
Yeah.
But it's so.
What always shocks me is like Michael C. Hall, right? Who played Dexter.
Yeah.
Great TV series. I had no idea that man is English.
Oh, that's amazing.
You know, and because like you first hear, and all of these, there's a lot of people who you would think are like American. They have American accents, or like when Idris Elba, you know, speaks in different accents. He has kind of like a northern accent, you know, but he doesn't come off like that.
He's very posh.
Yeah, it's very funny to me. So it's like you can't really. I mean, but I guess Brooklyn accent's sort of like a stain on your clothes. It's really hard to get
I
off.
mean, I guess he's like a really good physical actor. Then let's just say he's a fine physical actor.
Yeah.
But it's funny because when I first saw him in this movie, he reminded me so much of Mo Howard from the Stooges.
Yeah.
And Mo Howard, I mean, his chin, his eyes, everything.
Yeah.
And Mo Howard had that classic, "Hey, what are you doing here, fellas? Yeah, come on."
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like I saw that voice coming out of this guy even before I read this.
That's fair.
Now, after reading all of that, I already was like dazzled by this. I'm like, oh, what an interesting story for like a mute Native American at the end of this movie. If it didn't get any freaking better, it does. Oh God, it does. And I even wrote that.
I can only
as
imagine.
if it doesn't get any more interesting. Nick also played opposite William Shatner as the something on the wing gremlin in the Twilight Zone's season 5, episode 3, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, 1963.
Really?
He was uncredited. So I'm getting it out there.
That's rude.
Yeah.
How are you uncredited as the co-star, or at least like the monster in the thing? That pisses me off because that's such a classic episode.
Yeah. He's that googly-eyed creature looking through the window right at William Shatner. And he is uncredited, so everyone now knows that was Nick Kravitz. Give him his due. Episode, by the way, was directed by Richard Donner, who directed Goonies and the original Superman. So we spoke briefly earlier about the matte paintings in this.
Yeah.
And I want to bring it up because matte paintings were, you know, how you did those big, beautiful landscapes back in the day when you couldn't shoot something. You had to, you know, you didn't have the budget. And I remember the very first one in this movie that I saw. I immediately said, this is the same matte painter who worked on Mary Poppins. In my mind, I just said that. I go, this is the guy who worked on Mary Poppins.
Nice.
And I was right.
Hell yeah.
Because Peter Ellenshaw supplied the matte paintings for this film. Peter previously worked on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954, and his work on Mary Poppins earned him an Academy Award. His matte paintings of London's rooftops, parks, and skylines gave the film its enchanting and immersive backdrops. He later worked on Black Hole, 1979, where he worked with his son, who everyone here will remember, Harrison Ellenshaw, the guy who created the character for Watcher in the Woods.
Oh, yes.
He created the Watcher in the Woods monster.
Nice. Yeah.
I know, brought it all back together. I love it.
Yeah.
And Peter Ellenshaw is awesome because I think I was telling you about this little documentary I saw where he took his painting of London in Mary Poppins and he scratched out all these tiny little bits so that they could bring down the lighting in the studio and they could backlight the painting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the painting looked like there were all these little lights.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Like all these street lights had come on and all these lamp lights had come on all over the city.
Yeah.
I thought that was so genius.
Classic.
In 2009, an episode of Mythbusters tested whether Crockett could split a bullet in half on the blade of an axe at 40 yards. Yeah. And they concluded that it was indeed possible.
Yeah, I guess that's part of his lore, is that's how accurate of a shot he was. That's one thing I remember about the Davy Crockett kind of, American folktale, is that he was such he was a crack shot.
Yeah.
And apparently that was like a test of his skill, is doing that. And apparently it can be done.
I wonder how much crap they had to rig up. Like
I know. I would like to watch that.
Gun in this stocked block and everything. They had to have the wind just right. Crockett enlisted as 3rd Sergeant for a 6-month term with the Tennessee Mounted Gunmen under Captain John Cowan in September 28, 1814. Crockett's unit saw little of the main action because they were days behind the rest of the troops and were focused mostly on foraging for food. Crockett returned home in December. He was still on military reserve status until March 1815. So he hired a young man to fulfill the remainder of his service.
That's so awesome, dude. Yeah, and
hey, man,
I guess like one thing the movie doesn't cover, and I covered it a little bit briefly, but in the movie, his wife died while he was away. But in actuality, his wife died while he was home for the winter.
Yeah,
and then he remarried, and so there's like these big chunks of his life that are missing. And to me, that's a giant chunk of like, oh, I don't need, I'm just going to hire somebody to take my place. Are you joking me?
And I want to know how that happened. Like, is there like a bill of sale or something that the new guy presents to Cowan and just says, here,
that's me.
I'm here for Crockett.
Probably a letter saying this man is taking my place and I'm like a free man. And if I was Cowan, I'd be like, why can't you both come here? We need you. We need everybody. Yeah. What's going on?
It would have been nice to have you both, jackass.
Yeah.
While serving in the United States House of Representatives, Crockett became a Freemason. He entrusted his Masonic apron to a friend in Tennessee before leaving for Texas, and it was inherited by the friend's descendant in Kentucky. Do we know where it is now?
I don't.
Is it in a museum? Is it in a museum?
It belongs in a museum.
So do you. But that's interesting. I actually didn't know that he'd become a Freemason.
Neither did I. And it's sort of like it plays into the conspiracy of like the government is all in the shadow world of the Freemasons or whatever. And it's like, okay, it's fine.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting though, because there must have been some sort of pitch given to him that he was like, this is a good organization or what have you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, because if there was a certain untowardness in them, I feel like he'd be like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, before leave, see, this is interesting. So I'm on the Maryland Masons website. So I'm probably now on some watch list. mdmasons.org, and it says Crockett immediately took up the cause of Texas independence and set out with a company of men from his Tennessee home in November of 1835. So the movie shows it's just 3 people, and 2 of them they picked up along the way. But apparently he had a company of men to go into Texas to help fight. Before leaving, he entrusted his Masonic apron to his local lodge, where it remains to this day. His daughter Matilda later recalled the last time she saw her father. He was dressed in his hunting suit, wearing a coonskin cap, and carried a fine rifle presented to him by friends in Philadelphia. He seemed very confident the morning he went away that he would soon have us all join him in Texas.
Oof.
And it took him 2 months to get there. It took him 2 months to get to Texas from Tennessee.
Yeah, they don't talk about travel time. Like there's a scene where Georgie's like, what is it? They're talking about the bill. And he's like, they're talking about the bill right now. And he's like, well, what's the fastest way? Way I come on horses.
Horseback, yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, let's go get some from Enterprise Rent-A-Horse and get out of here. And it's like 20 minutes later, they're there. That's what it felt like.
Well, the way Congress moves, I didn't find that too strange. You know what I mean? Yeah, it was a lot of the Alamo stuff. So apparently what really happened, so in the movie, he rides through the gate being chased by Mexican soldiers. But what really happens is he gets to Texas and enlists in the local militia. And they go, oh, you're Davy Crockett. You should be a colonel. And he goes, no, make me a private because I'm new here and that should be my rank. Yeah. So he was very humble about it, but it was definitely not like, oh, he got chased into suddenly the Alamo. Like it was a thing where dude,
it's so boring. Yeah. I'm sure he walked up to a place that had literally a table and he had to fill out a form.
Maybe. I don't know, man. Yeah. I mean, he's Davy Crockett, for God's sake. You can do whatever you want.
He looks down and they look at the form. Davy Crockett, the Davy Crockett, half alligator, half horse. And he's like, yeah, that's me.
That's me. Can't you tell? On my skin. Anyway, that's Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, man.
Yeah.
All in all, not a bad movie.
I liked it.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I liked it. And this is a movie that is very old and it feels like it would be dated, but it's like, it keeps the pace. It is rolling and it's folksy in a fun way.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I agree. What I kind of appreciated about it is, you hear about Westerns and you see Westerns, like old Westerns from the time. John Wayne movies, spaghetti westerns, whatever. And all the Native Americans are played by like Italians, right?
Yes.
But this one, the Creek Indians with Red Stick and everybody, they look, and I think they are in the credits, and they're Native Americans, like they're actual Native American actors.
Yeah.
Except for Busted Luck, who was clearly Italian by way of Brooklyn.
And there might be a few people. I looked in the background the second time I watched it, and it feels like there may be one or two people who were like Mexican passing.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, well, we need somebody to fill out this scene. But I think they did it seems like they did a fair job to get actual Native Americans in this movie.
They did, and they were
roles.
speaking the language too. They were speaking, Creek and Comanche. As far as I know, because I had the subtitles on because I'm old now, and I can't understand anything. But it said speaking native language, and I feel like a lot of movies at the time would just have them speaking in English, no matter if they were around English people or English speaking people or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and really kind of like, I don't say gentrifying because I know that's not the right word, but it's sort of the same thing of just playing everything down. But at least, I don't know, it felt a little more, looking back on it now, culturally aware of like, hey, let's try to at least present this as realistic as possible, whether or not they were being aware of the culture of the Native Americans or not. I don't know. It was kind of, that was kind of refreshing from some of the other Westerns I've seen.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would agree.
All right, man, let's get out of here. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we've probably jawboned as much about Davy Crockett as we're going to for a day.
As we can. Yeah. I was excited, honestly, because, again, he was a real person. I think that's, super, super interesting. And it's one of the only movies that I think we're going to find that is, like this. It's such a grasp on the middle of, the 20th century as Davy Crockett did. But you know what? And I was thinking, I've never given out an email address for this show. If you guys want to contact us, if you want to send us any email or complain or whatever, you can go to earsup-podcast.com and there's a contact us section. You can go there, or you can email me, Jason, at earsup-podcast.com. If you want to suggest a movie, we are winding up season 1 here. We're going to, in the next month or two, we have 3 more movies to get to. And then we're going to take a break. So if you want to suggest anything for season 2, shoot me an email. Let me know if you think that we're the greatest thing ever and you want to hire us for your corporate podcast hosting. Do that too, man. Send me an email. Do whatever you want to do.
Oh, yeah. I'll say whatever you want.
That's right. Yeah. If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say. All right. We're going to get out of here. Matt, thank you very much again. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, go watch Davy Crockett. It was a blast. Sort of.
Yes.
It was fine. It was fine. It was a movie.
Go check out my other show. It's Shelter from Oblivion. And go back and listen to our Halloween episode. It actually came out to be pretty good. It was a doozy. If you like talking about old Halloween candy and whether or not you carried a pail or a pillowcase, this is going to be the show for you.
There you go. Nowadays, kids just have backpacks.
Yeah.
Is that a thing where you live? The backpack in the front, and they just open they just open the backpack, and you just like.
If I saw that, I would shake with rage. No, we went with glow in the dark plastic pails this year.
Nice.
And I was very happy.
Hell yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we'll see you. I need a sign off. I need a cute sign off, but I'll work on it.
We need something fun.
Email me as a suggestion for a cute sign off. But
buena bye.
Yeah, blah,
terrible.
Blah, blah, blah.
No.
Yeah, no, let's not do that. All right, bye guys.
Notched you up like an old razorback.
They can't shoot for sour apples.